Chapter 467. The sixth layer of defense has been destroyed. It's fine. From the seventh layer onward, all the bases are within the sacred land. The prowess of the Netherworld Dojo has been increased through the extraction of ether particles. Before he finished his words, Feng Xingjian had already plunged headfirst into the seventh layer of defense. The faint yellow defensive light was broken through layer by layer, as if they were pieces of paper. "Damn it!" The Phantom Knight bellowed furiously. "Are number 9 and number 10 not here yet?" The adjutant reported. "There are too many restrictions on the two of them. The technical team is still helping them remove the restrictions. They can probably only be placed before the ninth layer of defense." As they spoke, 6 light pillars burst out from behind Feng Xingjian, sweeping against the 8th layer of defense. The barriers started to melt at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. The Phantom Knight waved his hand and said, "Get them to speed up." In the image, Feng Xingjian had already penetrated through the entire 8th layer of defense within a short few minutes. He brought along a series of afterimages as he headed toward the 9th layer. Not long later, a dazzling golden layer of defense that seemed to be made from pure gold appeared before him. There were all sorts of unknown words and images engraved on it. They looked like some kind of incantation, flashing with a mysterious glow. Feng Xingjian did not take a closer look at the 9th layer of defense. Instead, he looked at the area in front of the 9th layer of defense. 2 huge steel coffins were erected there, and waves of strong malicious intent kept on coming out from the coffins. The blatant malicious intent seemed as if it wanted to destroy all the beautiful things in the world. Just as Feng Xingjian was looking at the 2 coffins, 2 bangs rang out, and the coffin's doors opened. The malicious intent from earlier became even stronger, and Feng Xingjian could even feel as if there were ferocious beasts using their tongues to lick his skin. At the next moment, a pitch-black foot was lifted up from the coffins. Then a pitch-black man who was so skinny that he looked like a skeleton walked out. His head kept turning as if he was observing the situation and the surroundings. "He's here." Feng Qian's eyes were filled with excitement when she saw number 9 stepping out from the mirror image. The source of the materials for number 9 was not just any ordinary material. It was a demigod powerhouse that they had stolen from a tomb. This demigod powerhouse was known as the Heavenly Demon more than 500 years ago. He was a strange person who had an eccentric personality since he was young, and his killing intent was boiling. When he was 10 years old, he killed his entire family. When he was 11 years old, he joined the Prime Council. When he was 20 years old, he killed the most powerful expert in the entire council. From then on, he roamed the continent, and wherever he went, there would be bloodshed. Finally, at the age of 25, he disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he had gone, and no one knew what had happened to him until the first prince's subordinates found him in an ancient tomb. He had actually died in the process of robbing the tomb. After that, they were kept in cold storage for a long period of time as raw materials for weapons. This continued until Feng Qian arrived. She needed the corpses of experts as experimental materials. The Heavenly Demon's body was cloned and revived, and the organs, bones, and nerves throughout his body were all replaced with the best parts of various ferocious beasts. His consciousness was also awakened by the first prince performing the ancient path of Hell's ultimate technique, the Hell's Soul Replacement Scripture. Of course, the ancient path of Hell's ultimate technique, the Hell's Soul Replacement Scripture, could not really awaken a dead person's consciousness. Instead, it could only channel in a predetermined consciousness. However, the Hell's Soul Replacement Scripture had been incomplete for a very long time. Even the first prince could only channel in some of the information he knew about the Heavenly Demon and then rely on the remnant instincts in the Heavenly Demon's body to awaken him. The Heavenly Demon. 500 years ago, he was the most brutal and terrifying demigod in the entire continent. Moreover, after I performed cloning techniques and black magic, not only did his consciousness awaken, but he even obtained an even stronger physical body. Due to the fact that the number 9 and number 10 experimental bodies were too powerful and had consciousnesses that were hard to control, Fang Qian gave up on channeling her consciousness into their physical bodies. Instead, she used the method of transferring consciousness to control the physical bodies of these experimental bodies. Therefore, the experimental bodies after number 10 were just empty shells. Number 9 and number 10 were the strongest experimental bodies that Fang Qian had created. Thinking of this, Fang Qian's eyes were filled with excitement. "Let me see your power." At the scene, the heavenly demon's head was moving slowly like a rusty gear. Then he took one step at a time, heading in the direction of the exit. From the beginning to the end, he did not even throw a glance at Fang Xingjian. Tyrant, who had disguised himself as a Bengal, observed the heavenly demon grimly and reminded Fang Xingjian, "This guy is very dangerous. Extremely dangerous." Dangerous? Fang Xingjian did not look at the heavenly demon. Instead, he looked at the steel coffin that was marked with the number 10 and said, "The thing inside is the one that's really troublesome." "Oh," Tyrant asked puzzledly, "but why don't I sense any danger?" "It's because the thing inside is now focused all its killing intent and malicious intent on me." Fang Xingjian's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's as if it's pointing a knife at me." Just as Fang Xingjian finished saying this, a crimson-red figure dashed out from the coffin with a swoosh. It pounced onto the heavenly demon like a crimson cheetah. The figure was covered in crimson red light, looking as if crimson blood was burning. He was on all fours, and his head looked like that of a human's. However, the corners of his mouth were almost at the bottom of his ears, and he was filled with an evil and brutal aura. A long tail extended out from his tailbone. There was even a long bone spike on it, exuding a cold glow. The heavenly demon's head was pressed down by one of his claws, and the ferocious gleam in his eyes intensified. His palm, which was as dry as firewood, unleashed an explosive power akin to a volcanic eruption, smashing out fiercely toward the strange red figure's head. However, faced with the heavenly demon's counterattack, the strange red figure opened its mouth and swallowed the heavenly demon's fist. The heavenly demon's fist entered the strange red figure's mouth and was swallowed in one gulp. His entire arm disappeared, as if the heavenly demon's fist had no power at all. The strange red figure licked its mouth and broke into a satisfied smile. The heavenly demon's countenance changed slightly. He felt that his earlier punch had been like a clay ox entering water, unable to hit anything. Seeing that the strange red figure had opened its mouth and was about to bite him once again, the heavenly demon frowned. He felt that the instincts in his body kept on surging. In such a situation of life and death, the instincts in his body were awakened, ceaselessly replenishing his memories. The heavenly demon let out an enraged bellow, and the killing technique, primal waves, was unleashed. Waves of sound waves, which vibrated at an astonishing frequency, struck the strange red figure's body. Then at the next moment, they passed through the strange red figure and smashed onto the ceiling. Tremors could be one of the killing techniques with the greatest destructive prowess. Wherever the primal waves passed by, the entire underground rock stratum would turn into dust, and everything with a tangible form would be turned into dust. It forcefully created a hole that was over several hundred meters long, displaying an astonishing destructive prowess. Chapter 468. No one knew how high the frequency of the sound waves that the heavenly demon had unleashed were. Everyone could only see that wherever the sound waves passed by, all living things would wither, the world would shatter, and everything would turn into the most basic particles. Meanwhile, the strange crimson figure, who was in the lead, appeared before everyone unscathed. His body kept on being stretched out and enlarged by the sound waves, like a piece of extremely tough rubber. He kept on expanding, but also absorbed all the power. It was only when the energy of the sound waves was depleted that he shrunk back to his original size. Then, under the heavenly demon's horrified gaze, he bit off half of the heavenly demon's chest and then swallowed it whole. The scene of the heavenly demon being swallowed looked like a university student beating up a kindergartner. The heavenly demon struggled crazily. Each punch, and kick capable of shaking mountains and causing earthquakes. The primal waves that he kept on releasing from his mouth caused the entire rock stratum to crumble and almost penetrate through the ground above his head. However, such attacks were like those of a baby before the strange crimson figure. They were casually blocked and even absorbed, and then the heavenly demon could only watch as his body was slowly eaten up. In the control room, everyone who saw this brutal scene could not help but feel a chill run down their spines. Even though they were already used to massacres and bloodshed, they still felt disgusted at the sight of this scene. Eating humans was an act that could be seen as inhuman. Naturally, no one present could accept it. Feng Qian shouted, "Is it still not enough? Can't you control him?" The Phantom Knight remained seated, not understanding. His eyes emitted a seven-colored glaze-like glow. The glow grew increasingly brighter, and his countenance turned increasingly grim. He said in a deep voice, "It can't be done. I can't control him." Cold sweat kept on dripping down from his head. "He's not affected by me at all. How did this happen?" Hearing the Phantom Knight's words, everyone was shocked. They had not expected that number 10 would lose control. Feng Qian said in surprise, "How did this happen? Wasn't he still able to control it the last time?" "I don't know." The Phantom Knight's countenance turned extremely grim. Just then, he suddenly let out an agonizing cry and covered his eyes tightly. Fresh blood kept on flowing out from the gaps between his fingers. He's attacking me. This guy is also good at consciousness attacks." With a thud, the eyes of everyone who heard this were filled with astonishment. Hildebrand was the first to stand up and say, "Isn't number 10's forte his physical strength and ability to engulf and regenerate? As long as he devoured life, he could use it to regenerate his body. Since when is he good at consciousness attacks?" Everyone present was a genius that was 1 in 10,000. None of them were fools. When Hildebrand said these words, they reacted at the same time. The enraged lion said, "Unless he did it on purpose. This guy, he hid his strength." However, just as he finished speaking, a voice rang out in everyone's mind. "Bingo, bingo." This time, everyone's expression changed drastically. They looked at the mirror image and found that the crimson figure was staring at them. The smile on his face was indescribably evil. As his mouth moved, the same voice continued to ring in everyone's mind. "If it wasn't because that kid from the underworld sect was around, how could I have shown weakness and been captured by you guys? You guys are good, really good. Not only did you seal up a large part of my body's functions, you even locked me up in that dark, damp place where there's nothing. There's nothing at all." Saying this, the crimson figure bellowed furiously. "Even if you're going to *king keep a cat, you should at least prepare a litter box for it." The furious bellow exploded in everyone's mind, and they felt as if there was a tempest raging in their minds. They felt giddy, and their bodies started to stagger. The crimson figure's voice started to slowly dissipate in everyone's mind. "Just wait in your tortoise shells. I'll come and look for you guys immediately." In the control room, everyone's countenances turned extremely grim. Hildebrand said, "We must inform the First Prince. We need reinforcements here." "I asked you to send a message earlier," the enraged lion said. "Next, gather all our forces. We must think of a way to capture number 10. The Mirage Knight said, "Miss Feng Qian, you're the person here who understands number 10 the best. If we wish to capture him, other than using my illusory arts to control him, what other methods do we have?" Feng Qian's countenance was grim. She was the only one here who understood number 10 the best. He had been discovered together with the Heavenly Demon. It was just that the Heavenly Demon was a tomb robber, while number 10 was the tomb owner. It was a pity that they had not been able to figure out number 10's true identity even after repeatedly researching the ancient tomb. After the First Prince had sealed number 10, Feng Qian had tested the various attributes of number 10's body one by one. Therefore, she had a strong understanding of his physical strength. However, what astonished her even more today was number 10's consciousness attack abilities. Moreover, this was what he excelled in. Hearing the Mirage Knight's question, Feng Qian said, "He's over 5 kilometers away from us. Based on my research into martial will and information flow attacks, this kind of attack will weaken rapidly as the distance increases. He's able to knock us unconscious from 5 kilometers away. Once we get close, we probably won't be able to win against him. This guy has always pretended that his strongest points are his physical body and his ability to absorb attacks. However, consciousness attacks should be what he excels in. His abilities are probably much stronger than what we estimated previously. At the thought of this, everyone's countenances turned even grimmer. Number 10's physical strength was already extremely powerful to begin with. Now that he had such a powerful consciousness attack, once number 10 got close to them, he would only need to launch a consciousness attack like earlier, taking advantage of the fact that he was in a daze to attack them. They would probably suffer great losses immediately. The Phantom Knight ordered, "Since that's the case, we'll mobilize all our troops. We must suppress test subject number 10 completely. We'll change our positions immediately. We mustn't fight against number 10 head-on." Right now, all of their thoughts were on number 10. As for Feng Xingjian, whom they had wanted to deal with earlier, they had long since treated him as a dead man right before number 10. "Haha, you guys are thinking too much." Suddenly, number 10's voice rang out in everyone's minds once again. At the next moment, an intense pain spread through everyone's brains in the command center. "Thank you for your information. As expected, that kid from the Hell sect isn't here. You guys can just wait for me to come over. I'll take good care of you guys." At the next moment, an extremely evil and brutal aura, which seemed to be the dirtiest and most vicious in the world, spread out rapidly in everyone's minds. Hildebrand let out an astonished cry. It was because he realized that this was far too similar to the evil he had sensed from the divine level spinal bone in the past. However, this time around, this gush of will was even more agile, powerful, and majestic. This was also the first time that Hildebrand felt how terrifying this evil will was when it was not used for defense, but to take the initiative to attack. Chapter 469. Faced with this malevolent will, the Phantom Knight and the others' martial wills were unable to put up any resistance at all. Faced with this aura, it was as if their consciousness was completely defenseless. This malevolent will was the natural enemy of humans, and they were completely unable to resist it. Feng Qian, Hildebrand, the Phantom Knight, the Death Warrior, and the Enraged Lion all fell down limply. They discovered that under the impact of the malevolent will, their consciousness had been shattered. They were no longer able to circulate waves and mental cultivation methods with their brains. It was because the moment they did so, they would feel waves of intense pain in their brains. At this moment, they were no longer able to use their extraordinary powers. Due to the intense pain in their brains, even their limbs did not seem to listen to them. They could only look at the mirror image of number 10, waiting for his next move. Feng Qian looked at that crimson-red silhouette in disbelief. What on earth is this monster? Why are we so much weaker in terms of consciousness attacks and defenses? As a second transition magic Prince Knight, although Feng Qian did not have as many realms as conferred knights, she had borrowed the evil god's powers. Regardless of whether it was in terms of attributes or other techniques, she was not much weaker than conferred knights of the same level. In fact, due to the existence of the evil god, she was even stronger. However, right now, faced with number 10's consciousness attack, she was completely unable to resist at all. Moreover, because she did not have the martial will that conferred knights had tempered after crossing the 10 heavenly barriers step by step, her resistance against the malevolent will's impact was even weaker. The enraged lion shouted, "What on earth is this willpower impact? It's as if it was born to counter us." The Phantom Knight was also in disbelief. To think that he's able to render us immobile with just a single thought from 5 kilometers away? How on earth did he do that? Feng Qian's countenance grew increasingly grim. It was because she realized that she could not focus at all. The waves of dizziness in her head made her unable to control the extraordinary powers in her body. This ability seems to be born to counter humans. Feng Qian looked at the mirror image of number 10 with deep terror in her eyes. If this goes on, all of us will be killed. After number 10 completely engulfed the heavenly demon, he turned to look at Feng Xingjian and said, "Lad, why is there a detestable smell coming from you?" Feng Xingjian sensed the excitement coming from the Heaven's Volition sword intent, nodded, and said, "What are you? Is this a test subject created by the people of this base? Experimental subjects?" Number 10 revealed an extremely disdainful smile and said, "With just them? A bunch of clowns just happened to wake me up." As he said that, he looked at Feng Xingjian with an evil smile. "Let me have a taste of you first." At the next moment, a gush of evil will gushed into Feng Xingjian's mind. It was just like the evil will from the divine-level spinal bone he had encountered previously. It exuded a terrifying and evil feeling that would cause one to be unable to move. It was as if it wanted to destroy everything beautiful in the world. However, compared to the malevolent will in the divine-level spinal bone the previous time around, the strength of this malevolent will was clearly much weaker. Although Feng Xingjian felt uncomfortable, it was not as unstoppable as the previous time around. Under the impact of the willpower, he could still move and activate the Heaven's Volition sword intent. Sensing the increasingly intense battle intent from the Heaven's Volition sword intent, Feng Xingjian no longer suppressed it and allowed the sword intent to do as it pleased. At the next moment, the sword intent darted out of Feng Xingjian's mind and dashed into number 10's consciousness. If it could be said that number 10's malevolent will was a form of restraint to most humans, then the Heaven's Volition sword intent was also a natural nemesis to number 10. In less than a second after the Heaven's Volition sword intent dashed into number 10's consciousness, he immediately grabbed his head and let out an agonizing cry. He felt as if all the memories, consciousness, instincts, and other information in his mind had been stirred up into a mess. Waves of malevolent will wanted to resist, but before the Heaven's Volition sword intent, they were like melted butter, easily slashed into pieces. Number 10 cried out in astonishment. "What is this?" At the next moment, number 10 endured the pain coming from his brain. His crimson-red body brought along countless crimson-red afterimages as he charged out toward Feng Xingjian. Faced with number 10's counterattack, Feng Xingjian's body flashed slightly and then disappeared completely, leaving behind countless sword light that swept onto number 10's body. The Astral Obscurity sword was activated. The long sword continued to sweep out toward number 10. Amidst the streams of sword light, Feng Xingjian once again displayed his unrivaled sword arts cultivation. The most powerful part of the Astral Obscurity sword was that it could allow one's physical body to hide in spatial gaps, entering an almost invincible state. However, its attacking prowess was a lot weaker. Even a genius in sword arts like the Supreme Chief had not been able to continue improving after creating the Astral Obscurity sword and using the Astral Obscurity sword in combination with other sword techniques. However, all of this was too easy for Feng Xingjian. At the same time that the Astral Obscurity sword was activated, the Prodigious Demolition sword physique was also activated. As Feng Xingjian's physical body disappeared, countless demolition sword light slashed down on number 10's body. In that instant, blood and flesh splattered all over number 10's body. His powerful physical body, which could withstand and absorb all sorts of impacts, was unable to put up any resistance at all under Feng Xingjian's Astral Obscurity sword and Prodigious Demolition sword physique. He continued to suffer physical damage at the level of physical particles. The consciousness in number 10's mind was in a bleak state, and his physical body kept on being slashed. Number 10 did not even know where his opponent was, let alone attack. Letting out a terrified bellow, number 10 knew that he could not go on like this. He used all his strength to head deeper into the base. Streams of sword intent pierced through his brain, but he used all his might to suppress and heal them. Behind him, several tens of Prodigious Demolition sword light would land on him from time to time, chasing closely behind him and slashing his body until blood and flesh splattered all over. However, it was true that number 10's vitality was very strong. Even though he was continuously slashed by the prodigious demolition sword light, and over 40% of his body's tissues had been depleted, he was still able to move as per normal. He was like a tank charging forward, smashing through many walls, and even digging through layers of rock strata. He kept on closing in on Fang Qian and the others in a straight line. In the end, the guards they encountered along the way were crushed to death by the shock waves created by the two of them as they passed by. There was no need to pay special attention to them. In the control room, everyone was breaking out in cold sweat as they looked at the mirror image before them. Fang Xingjian, why is he able to perform the Supreme Chief's astral obscurity sword? Hildebrand said in astonishment. Could it be that the Supreme Chief and the others? Let's not think about this for now, the Phantom Knight said anxiously. They're coming. Fang Qian stared at the streams of sword light in the image. It was hard to imagine that number 10, who could easily defeat them from a distance of 5 kilometers, would be chased by Fang Xingjian like a dog. To think that they had wanted to deal with Fang Xingjian in such a state. Chapter 470. Just as everyone in the command post was astonished by Fang Xingjian's and number 10's performance, the wall behind them trembled fiercely. Then a large part of the wall started to protrude out from the tremors. As the wall protruded to a certain limit, the entire surface of the wall started to shatter, sending out streams of deep cracks. This continued until a fist reached out from the center of the cracks, smashing a huge hole in the wall. Number 10 walked in and saw the 5 people lying on the ground. His gaze was filled with excitement, and he leaped toward the Phantom Knight impatiently, biting off his neck with a single bite. The pitiful Phantom Knight was a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. However, after being attacked by the evil will, he was unable to unleash even a hint of his extraordinary powers. Although he was on the brink of death, and his physical body, which had attained perfection in specialty seeds, unleashed a powerful explosive power as he continued to struggle and counterattack, almost causing the entire command post to collapse. He was still unable to harm number 10. A large part of his body was devoured by number 10. After engulfing a demigod with 1 tier of perfection in his specialty seeds and a demigod whose physical body contained endless power, number 10's originally miserable body started to recover rapidly. Even his physical strength increased once again. This was number 10's true power. He was able to rapidly increase his strength by engulfing the bodies of living creatures, especially humans. After eating up the Phantom Knight in less than a second, he leaped once again and grabbed the despairing, enraged lion. This former secret agent of the Steel Lion Kingdom was now like a defenseless infant before number 10. He punched and kicked number 10's body crazily, but all of his powers were completely absorbed and neutralized, accompanied by banging sounds of collisions and number 10's trembling body. He was unable to stop number 10 for even a split second. Number 10's mouth kept on opening up at an unbelievable speed, almost as wide as the enraged lion's height. He then swallowed the enraged lion's entire upper body. Then as he exerted force with his teeth, the enraged lion let out a maniacal and agonizing cry. The enraged lion's entire upper body was slashed off and then swallowed into number 10's body. In that instant, the enraged lion unleashed all of his powers and started to struggle. Intense explosive sounds kept ringing out from number 10's body, and over 1,000 fist prints appeared on the surface of number 10's skin. His body continued to expand and shrink until the frequency of his movements became lower and lower. Then, under Fang Qian's terrified gaze, the enraged lion's bloody head popped out from number 10's mouth. Save me. His face, which was covered in tears and blood, was filled with despair. In the end, number 10 smiled and pressed his hand down. A loud gulping sound rang out from number 10's body. After consecutively engulfing 2 human experts, his physical injuries had completely recovered. Not only that, under Hildebrand's and Fang Qian's horrified gazes, number 10's body trembled abruptly, and hints of electricity even started to extend out from his body. Large green veins wrapped around his neck, and his spine protruded. Fang Qian said in surprise, "What's wrong? What happened to him?" She looked at Hildebrand, and the latter shook his head in a daze. He said unconsciously, "From the looks of it, why does it seem like he's strengthening his body and cultivating the heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces?" However, at the next moment, an even more astonishing scene appeared. Number 10's eyes flickered slightly, and streams of light that were like seven-colored glaze appeared in his eyes. This was the Phantom Knight's illusory technique. Fang Qian then looked at Number 10's hands. In the next instant, his hands transformed. His muscles contracted and lengthened, and many sharp claws broke out from his fingertips. This is the Enraged Lion's technique, the Steel Lion Kingdom's Beast King's Claw. It can instantly change the structure of the hands at the level of physical particles, possessing effects such as sharpness, acceleration, poison, numbness, and so on. The Steel Lion Kingdom in the north could be said to be the country that specialized in and most popular with transformations. Their experts would usually be able to increase their abilities through repeated transformations, gaining many abilities that they did not have before. Seeing Number 10 display the Phantom Knights and the Enraged Lion's techniques, a terrifying thought rose in everyone's minds. At the next moment, Number 10's strange laughter rang out in the trio's hearts. Your guesses are right. Other than being proficient in willpower impacts, my physical body's true ability is to keep on evolving and strengthening through engulfing. There's even a chance that I can strip away some of the engulf techniques. As long as I'm given enough time, I'll be invincible. Hearing Number 10's message through his consciousness, regardless of whether it was Fang Chong, Hildebrand, or even the Death Warrior who had always been calm and unperturbed like an iceberg, all of them wore expressions of despair. His consciousness attack could seal up the extraordinary powers of a demigod at the first tier, and his physical abilities could keep on evolving through engulfing. He could even keep on stripping away other people's techniques. How on earth did such a monster appear? He's the human. No, the natural enemy of all living creatures. Fang Qian bellowed furiously in her heart. Right now, in her eyes, as long as Number 10 was given enough time, he would become an ultimate monster who could destroy the entire human world and kill countless human experts. Right now, what she was thinking about was not how to survive today, but how to spread the news. We must definitely inform the deity-level powerhouses and let them kill this monster before he fully matures. At this moment, she could no longer care about the concepts of interests, influences, and clans. Right now, what Fang Qian was facing was a crisis that concerned the survival of the entire human race. Number 10 broke into a brutal smile. With a light leap, he once again pounced toward the Death Warrior. However, just as he was about to land on the Death Warrior, there seemed to be a myriad of sword light flashing in void space. Thud, 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 thud. Colliding sounds rang out from Number 10's outstretched arm. Although they were unable to slash off Number 10's arm, they managed to stop his attack. Looking at the inch-deep wound on his arm, Number 10 laughed out loud. "Idiot, you're too late. The density of my body is no longer something that you could destroy easily." Number 10 had only taken a few seconds to engulf the two experts. However, the speed at which Fang Xingjian moved through the spatial gaps was much slower than usual, causing him to miss the scene where the two of them had been engulfed earlier. Fang Xingjian, who was in the spatial gaps, raised his brows slightly. Earlier, he had slashed down with the intention of slashing off Number 10's arm. However, even when the demolition sword light was completely depleted, he had only managed to slash open a wound that was only about an inch deep. To think that Number 10 had evolved after battling and engulfing. By greatly increasing the density of his physical particles, he was able to fend off the annihilation effect of Fang Xingjian's demolition sword light. With a high density, the mass that was annihilated was smaller. Number 10 swung his arm, and the wound started to dissipate at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. When Fang Qian saw the flash of sword light, a gleam of hope lit up in her eyes. However, when she saw Number 10's reaction, her hope turned into despair. Even Fang Xingjian can't kill him? However, knowing that Feng Xingjian, who was able to perform the Astral Obscurity Sword, had arrived. Although he was still not a match for number 10, at the very least, number 10 would not be able to capture Feng Xingjian. Thinking of this, Feng Qian immediately shouted, "Feng Xingjian, this monster can evolve by engulfing physical bodies. He can also strip other people of their skills by eating them. You must find a chance to inform the first prince and the second prince. If we don't kill him before he truly matures, the entire human world will face a great crisis." However, number 10 did not stop Feng Qian. Instead, he grinned as he watched everything. There was a strange gleam in his eyes. Chapter 471. Seeing Feng Qian's appearance, a hint of astonishment flashed in Feng Xingjian's eyes. He had not expected that Earth's Feng clan had already joined forces with the first prince and the others. Feng Qian, Hildebrand, and the Death Warrior all looked nervously at number 10. However, number 10's eyes gleamed with cold light, and the skin all over his body exuded a fluorescent glow. "Come on out, kid. Weren't you having a great time chasing after me earlier?" An insolent and arrogant aura gushed forth from number 10's face. He spread out his arms and protected the surrounding space, as if waiting for Feng Xingjian to attack once again. "I've already broken through your sword technique. Why get my hands on you? I'll tear you into strips and roast you to eat." Compared to his insolence, number 10 was feeling extremely nervous. What sword technique is this kid performing? Why is it that I can't find any traces of him at all? I must scare him away. Otherwise, if he keeps on staring at me, chasing after me, and slashing at me, no matter how strong my vitality is, I won't be able to hold on. Number 10's eyes narrowed abruptly. He knew that at this moment, the stronger his aura was, the higher the possibility of Feng Xingjian being scared away would be. His entire body squirmed as he activated the enraged lion's killing technique, Lion Man transformation. His muscles kept on trembling and changing shape, and his bones and joints became thicker. Streams of blood light spurted out from various parts of his body, as if countless wings had appeared. His canine teeth extended out by over 10 centimeters, and many hairs that could match up to the defense of superior divine weapons gushed out, turning him into a complete lion man. His claws moved, and over 10 centimeters long claws that seemed to be made of metal grew out. They clashed with each other, releasing clashing sounds. Excellent. This is the power. Feng Qian's countenance changed, and Hildebrand could not help but say, "To think that he can even use the Steel Lion Kingdom's Lion Man transformation? This killing technique can increase the user's explosive prowess and defense by over 1-fold. This monster, if this goes on, no one will be able to stop him." Number 10 broke into a satisfied smile and bellowed out again. However, no sword light flashed again. Although Feng Qian hoped that Feng Xingjian would leave to inform the first prince and the second prince, when she saw this situation together with Hildebrand and the Death Warrior, they knew that if this were to go on, they would definitely die. Looks of despair appeared on their faces, and number 10 nodded to himself. Have they really been scared off by me? Then let's test them again. At this moment, he increasingly felt the terror of his opponent's sword technique. He did not know where it came from, and he did not know where it went. It was as if there was a long sword hanging over number 10's head at any time, constantly giving him a sense of threat. If there's a chance, I'll definitely eat this brat up and learn his sword technique. Thinking of this, he spread his fingers and said coldly, "If you escaped, then so be it. I'll eat the 3 of you first." With a flash, he darted toward the Death Warrior. However, just then, the sword light in the air burst out once again. This time around, it burst out directly into number 10's eyes, turning them into dust. A world-shaking and agonizing cry rang out as number 10 struggled crazily. His claws struck out wildly toward the surrounding space. Accompanied by streams of afterimages and streams of air blades, the tables, chairs, walls, and ground in the surroundings were all slashed into pieces. The Death Warrior who was closest to him was slashed into countless pieces on the spot. However, Such attacks were unable to reach Fang Xingjian, who had darted into the spatial gaps. Just as he was crazily retaliating, another brilliant sword light burst out from his eyes, turning into streams of sword threads that darted into the depths of his eye sockets. It was as if they wanted to enter number 10's brain and wreak havoc. It was only with great difficulty that number 10 remembered to use his hands to block his eye sockets. This time around, there were countless sword marks on his palms, but he managed to fend off Fang Xingjian's attacks on his eyes. To think that this lad has thought of this. It's true that there are many parts of the body that can't change their density. For example, if the density of the eyeballs is changed, they won't be able to perform normal vision functions. Sensing waves of sword light sweeping to and fro on the surface of his body, number 10 let out a cold snort and wrapped up his entire body. He curled up like a ball and passively endured Fang Xingjian's attacks. Lad, you won't be able to kill me. Once you've depleted all of your energy today, I'll find your family and friends and eat all of them up. However, Fang Xingjian did not seem to have hurt him at all. His sword light burst out and continued to sweep across the surface of number 10's body. It was as if he was scraping off layers of number 10's skin. As the astral obscurity sword swept out, number 10 could only keep on increasing the majority of the particles in his body toward the surface of his body, increasing the density of the surface of his body in order to fend off Fang Xingjian's demolition sword light. However, as Fang Xingjian continued to perform the astral obscurity sword, the sword light became increasingly tricky, smoother, and more powerful. Earlier, there had only been several hundred swords wrapping around number 10's body. However, at the next moment, they had turned into a myriad of sword light surrounding him. After another 2 to 3 seconds, the sword light even started to distort and change, darting into all the gaps in number 10's body. Number 10 had no choice but to seal off his 7 apertures to fend off this attack. However, Fang Xingjian's improvement in his sword arts within a short period of time still made him extremely astonished. He did not know that Fang Xingjian was upgrading his astral obscurity sword. At the next moment, the sword light suddenly disappeared. Just as number 10 thought that Fang Xingjian had given up and was about to laugh, streams of sword light pierced out from under his skin. What? Fang Xingjian's prodigious demolition sword exploded in number 10's body. It was because within a short period of time, his astral obscurity sword had far surpassed that of the Supreme Chief's, reaching an unprecedented level 40. The level 40 astral obscurity sword could penetrate through physical matter through spatial gaps, unleashing explosive attacks from within any physical matter. Right now, when Fang Xingjian performed the astral obscurity sword, not only could he dart into spatial gaps to fend off attacks, but his attacks could also directly attack the insides of physical matter. In order to go up against Fang Xingjian, number 10 adjusted the density of his body toward his skin. This caused his skin to take up most of his mass, making it very hard for attacks to penetrate through it. However, on the other hand, the various organs in his body became much weaker. The prodigious demolition sword physique's abrupt eruption almost turned all the organs in his body into pools of blood in an instant. It was not just Fang Xingjian's sword technique. The Heaven's Volition sword intent was also unleashed simultaneously, sweeping through number 10's consciousness crazily and slashing his consciousness into pieces. Number 10 spat out a large mouthful of blood. At the next moment, under the astonished gazes of Fang Qian, Hildebrand, and the others, his entire body was encompassed by stacking layers of sword light. Simultaneously, the Heaven's Volition sword intent unleashed waves of excited glow, crazily dispelling number 10's evil will. In the end, number 10 was only left with a layer of outer shell standing stiffly in the air. Other than his skin, all other parts of number 10 had been completely destroyed by Fang Xingjian. The Heaven's Volition sword intent also returned to Fang Xingjian's mind with a sense of satisfaction. At the next moment, Fang Xingjian appeared before Fang Qian. He looked at Fang Qian expressionlessly, while the latter looked at Fang Xingjian with an astonished gaze. However, at the next moment, Fang Qian suddenly smiled. Fang Xingjian, I didn't expect that you'd be able to grow to such a level in just over half a year. Hildebrand looked at Feng Xingjian in a daze. A myriad of thoughts ran through his mind, and he was in a state of chaos. Chapter 472. To think that Feng Xingjian single-handedly managed to kill number 10 so easily. Thinking of how Feng Xingjian had chased after number 10 and slashed at him like a father beating up his own son from the beginning to the end, yet had not been injured in the slightest. Thinking of how Feng Xingjian had single-handedly wiped out the entire base. Hildebrand's expression was filled with bitterness. Suddenly, he looked at Feng Xingjian and asked, Feng Xingjian, where are my grandfather and the others? And the Supreme Chief and the others? Did you meet them? How did you learn the Supreme Chief's astral obscurity sword? Feng Xingjian said calmly, other than the Supreme Chief, I've killed everyone else. Hildebrand's eyes were wide open as he looked at Feng Xingjian in disbelief. It was as if his worldview had collapsed. However, with the abilities that Feng Xingjian had displayed, he believed that Feng Xingjian would be able to do this. His grandfather was the previous governor of the BI's continent, and could be said to be the pillar of their clan. To think that he had been killed by Feng Xingjian, Hildebrand felt extremely disheartened and worried about the future of their clan. What made him even more infuriated was that when he looked at Feng Xingjian, he could not even muster up any courage to go up against him. He's too strong. This Feng Xingjian is too strong. Even if I go all out and mobilize the entire clan, it'll just be suicide. Feng Xingjian threw a glance at Hildebrand and said, Do you want revenge? Looking at Hildebrand's grim countenance, Feng Xingjian said, Your grandfather came to kill me, so of course, I'll have to kill him. As for you, you got Tinin to look for trouble with me. Of course, I'll have to teach you a lesson as well. With that, he tapped out with his sword finger, and Hildebrand was sliced into two at the waist. However, as expected of the Academy's second-best student, Hildebrand did not wish to appear weak before Feng Xingjian. Even though he was in so much pain that green veins popped up on his forehead, he did not let out a single cry. Feng Xingjian nodded and said, That's right. I'll let you suffer a little. Although these injuries are painful, with your cultivation, it's enough for you to be reborn. I won't care about what you've done previously, but if you want to seek revenge, I'll still kill you. Then, Feng Xingjian turned to look at Feng Qian and said with a cold gleam in his eyes, Feng Qian, you're a member of the branch family, right? I really have many questions to ask you. Tell me why you're here first. Feng Qian let out a bitter laugh, lay on the ground, and took a long look at Feng Xingjian. When she thought of the power Feng Xingjian had displayed earlier, she felt extremely astonished. With this level of sword arts cultivation, if he's really immune to black magic, then maybe he can already go up against Li Shuanghua, Feng clan's old granny. Looking at Feng Xingjian, Feng Qian said, With your current abilities, you do indeed have the right to know about these things. When she said this, she was already speaking in Mandarin. Only she and Feng Xingjian could understand what she was saying. Hildebrand, on the other hand, was at a loss. The Feng clan only came into contact with the first prince about half a year ago. He possesses great technological prowess, so we're here to try out the combination of technology, magic prince, and ether particles. Feng Xingjian raised his eyebrows and asked, The thing that went out of control just now was also created by you guys. That's number 10. We didn't create him, and we haven't been able to modify him. As for the other two metal-skinned and black sky demons that you saw earlier, they were modified by us. Feng Xingjian thought of the evil coming from number 10, his strange abilities, and the aura that was similar to the evil aura from the divine level spinal bone. He asked, Where did you guys find that? Number 10? What the hell is he? Feng Qian shook her head. We don't know. We found him in an ancient tomb. That ancient tomb is a little strange. For now, we're unable to ascertain the era he was in. According to the research of the historians here, they weren't able to find any decorations or buildings that are similar to that of a country or dynasty. The strangest thing is, Feng Qian shook her head, puzzled. The language used in the ancient tomb is very similar to our Chinese. Very similar. It's just that it seems to be a little easier to write than our Chinese. Although we haven't seen many of the words before, we can still roughly understand them. Fang Qian smiled bitterly and shook her head. There are too many unsolved mysteries in Miracle World. There are a lot of gaps in the history here, making it hard for people to understand. Fang Xingjian thought of the Book of Origin and the 12 Onslaughts. He asked once again, "What's written in that ancient tomb?" There's very little content. It says that number 10, who they call the Descender, appeared in a country called China. He then engaged in all sorts of massacres and created disasters. In the end, the army back then expended countless sacrifices before they were able to capture him and seal him in an ancient tomb. They then warned the discoverer to leave, telling us that number 10 is very dangerous. Thinking of this, Fang Qian smiled bitterly and shook her head. It's a pity that we didn't take this seriously. Fang Xingjian asked, "They didn't say why they didn't kill number 10, nor did they say why they sealed him up like that." "No." Fang Qian shook her head. "China?" Fang Xingjian stroked his chin and asked, "Which country is that?" "I don't know," Fang Qian said. Simultaneously, Tyrant, who was in the bangle, frowned and said, "China. Why does it sound so familiar? I seem to have heard of it somewhere before." Fang Xingjian did not comment on this. He was merely curious about number 10's existence and background. Since Fang Qian could not answer much, he did not mind either. He looked straight into her eyes and asked, "Then tell me about the Fang clan's current situation." "Fang clan? That's right. Let me ask you first. That younger brother of mine, how is his situation?" Fang Xingqian? Fang Qian smiled coldly and said, "That younger brother of yours is doing very well. Not only has he become the Black Mage King's personal disciple, but he also has my younger brother as his apostle. His strength has improved by leaps and bounds. You should understand that regardless of whether it's black magic or magic prince, as long as the method is right and there are sufficient resources, the growth of one's strength will be very fast. It's just like mass production in a factory. It's not like the path of knights, which requires one to cultivate day and night." Fang Xingjian asked the question that he had been wanting to ask all along. The power of black magic comes from the gods beyond the heavens, and it's the same for Magic Prince as well. What on earth is their relationship? Was it invented by the Mage Association? What do you think? Fang Qian said calmly. The origin of Magic Prince is a top secret. Even I don't know about it. But from what I know, the association did not have Magic Prince in the past. No Magic Prince? That's right. In the history of Miracle World, and I mean the history that I can find, there's no such thing as Magic Prince, Fang Qian said. Fang Qian said, "Moreover, don't you feel that compared to black magic, Magic Prince are simpler and more practical? It's more technical, just like a product that has evolved from black magic." Fang Xingjian remained silent, but Fang Qian suddenly smiled and said, "Fang Xingjian, speaking of which, I have a piece of news for you for free. It's about your mother." Chapter 473. My mother. Hearing Fang Qian's words, Fang Xingjian felt as if there was a ball of fire burning in his chest. He glared at Fang Qian and said, "Speak. Your mother is a rare genius. You must have inherited your current talent from her," Fang Qian said calmly. Fang Qian said calmly, "Then do you know that your mother had already reached the divine level when you were born?" Divine level? Fang Xingjian was stunned for a moment. He stared at Fang Qian and said, "That's impossible. If she was at the divine level, she wouldn't have been beaten to death by that old hag, Li Shuanghua. It's because she was seriously injured. When she came to the Fang clan, she was already seriously injured." Fang Qian's face was filled with ridicule. "After that old hag, Li Shuanghua, beat your mother to death, she kept her corpse. That's impossible. My mother's ashes are placed in the Fang clan's mourning hall." "That's fake," Fang Qian said calmly. "The Empire has the technology to forge divine weapons. It can turn the bones of divine-level experts into divine remains equipment. Li Shuanghua has been coveting this technology for a long time. However, the technology on Earth hasn't really been able to develop. Therefore, she hasn't touched your mother's corpse. However, ever since she got into contact with the first prince, a tremendous amount of technical information has been sent over. Therefore, Li Shuanghua has already planned to use your mother's corpse to forge a divine remains equipment. Before Fang Qian could finish her words, almost by the time she reacted, her body had already penetrated through over 10 kilometers of the ground and air, arriving in the sky. Wherever she passed by, the ground would crack and the base would collapse. It was as if a huge dragon had turned over from underground. Feeling intense pain all over her body, her bones cracked, and her internal organs shattered, she spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked at Fang Xingjian, who was grabbing her by the neck. Sword light flashed in his eyes, and there was almost no longer a hint of his pupils or humanity. "You, calm down." Boom! Streams of sword force burst out explosively from the surface of Fang Xingjian's body, slashing the cloud layers within a range of 10 lis into dust. Even though the ground was several kilometers away, it was still lashed by countless invisible sword forces across space, creating many sword marks of varying depths that were several hundred or even several thousand meters long. Have you already done so? Or do you intend to do so? Think about it carefully and answer me. As long as I know that you're lying. Fang Xingjian's voice was as cold as the Siberian wind. Violent negative emotions kept spreading out from the depths of his sea of consciousness, gradually exceeding the level he could endure. As she finished her words, for streams of cross-shaped sword light flashed, and blood splattered on Fang Qian's body. Fang Qian let out a stifled snort. Looking at Fang Xingjian, whose face was filled with killing intent, she quickly bellowed, "Not yet. They're still making their final preparations. When are they going to start?" Fang Qian gulped. Fang Xingjian, whose killing intent was surging, gave her the feeling that he was a wild beast that had come from hell. Sword force continued to swim around in her body, and she felt as if her body would be torn into pieces at any moment. Half a month. There's still half a month's time before they attempt to cut up your mother's corpse. Right now, Fang Qian did not dare to hide anything, nor did she dare to bargain. After your mother's corpse died, Li Shuanghua sealed it in ice. It said that it has been preserved very well. They plan to open the seal in a week's time and start to cut up the corpse in 2 weeks. Fang Xingjian's mouth opened slightly, and streams of air currents seemed to accompany the exhalation of his lungs, turning into sword cheese and exhaling out from his mouth. Li Shuanghua, you really deserve to die. Endless killing intent spread out from Fang Xingjian's body. There had never been a moment in his life when he wanted to kill someone so badly. Only the last bit of rationality controlled him, allowing him to temporarily suppress the fury in his heart. I must rush back to Demonic City within a week. At the thought of this, Fang Xingjian looked at Fang Qian and said, "Tell me all the information regarding Li Shuanghua. Also, tell me the location of my mother's corpse." Fang Qian gulped. Looking at the situation around her and the ground under her feet, she said, "Do you want me to tell you here? There's still 1 more week before things start. Calm down. Let's settle the underground base's matters first. It won't take 1 or 2 hours." Fang Xingjian closed his eyes. He also knew that it was impossible for him to ignore the First Prince's underground base. Therefore, he tried his best to suppress the killing intent in his body. Fang Qian said, "This base is the culmination of the First Prince's countless efforts. It can be said to be his blood, sweat, and tears in the area of biological modification. His original goal was to use this technology to modify 36 divine-level experts to help him complete the Hell's Map. He even wanted to form an army of demigods. However, it's a pity that there are too many difficulties involved. Right now, we've barely managed to create a demigod body, and we've already depleted most of the base's resources." Fang Xingjian continued to listen and found out that a test subject by the name of Number 13 was the latest product of Fang Qian's research. His consciousness had been completely wiped out, and his physical body had been forcefully pushed to 2 tiers of perfection. This was very amazing. Fang Xingjian only needed to think of a way to transfer a portion of his consciousness, just like how the Holy Orzin's letter and the heavenly primordial annihilation armor's remnant consciousness had been channeled into this physical body. This way, he would be able to obtain a demigod body with 2 tiers of perfection. It was a pity that Feng Qian and the others had yet to come up with a plan to mass-produce this. Despite this physical body could be said to be the most valuable item in the entire underground base. An hour later, Hildebrand was standing on a sand dune several kilometers away with a pale countenance. The injuries on his waist seemed to have recovered. Looking in the direction of the underground base, he saw that after a world-shaking boom, the entire ground had caved in fiercely. Several million tons of sand fell crazily, ceaselessly filling up the shattered hole in the ground. In a short 1 to 2 hours, the entire underground base caved in completely and was filled up by endless sand. Hildebrand fell to the ground, his mind filled with Feng Xingjian's silhouette. Everyone in the Great Western Region Regional Academy discovered that Feng Xingjian had returned without them knowing. Along with him was a lady with black hair and eyes, who bore a slight resemblance to Feng Xingjian. In the secret chamber in the Sacred Land, Feng Xingjian frowned and asked, "Does this mean that there are a total of 7 divine-level experts on Earth?" "That's right," Feng Qian said. Feng Qian said, "Each of the 5 great clans has 1, and the Earth Federation has 2. If you wish to deal with Li Shuanghua, at least 2 of them will help her. In addition to her, there will be a total of 3 divine-level experts." Feng Xingjian did not say anything. Instead, he looked at a person on the other side. Although it was said to be a person, it was a little strange. It was because this person looked like a lump of flesh that kept on changing. The skin, muscles, and bones on its body kept on fluctuating and changing, as if it did not have a fixed shape. This was test subject number 13, which Feng Xingjian had snatched from the first prince's base. It was a demigod-level body that possessed 2 tiers of perfection in terms of body toughness and specialty seeds. Feng Qian asked again, "But it's not like you won't be able to defeat them. After all, you seem to be immune to the power of magic prince and diabolic energy, right?" Feng Xingjian lifted his head and threw a glance at Feng Qian, saying, "I'd like to know as well. Try it out on me." Chapter 474. An hour later, in the training room in the Sacred Land, Feng Qian looked at Feng Xingjian in a daze, as if she was looking at an alien. She mumbled, "All direct effects are ineffective. Indirect effects can be activated, but all defensive effects are useless." After an hour of experimentation, Feng Qian had obtained a rough result of Feng Xingjian's immunity. Using fireballs as an example, direct attacks from fireballs would be ineffective. However, when the fireballs exploded rocks and the rocks touched Feng Xingjian's body, they would be effective. It was the same for defense. Flames would be ineffective on one's body, but the flames would burn out a layer of armor, and the armor's defense would be effective. Feng Qian said, "But this is already very amazing. Based on what I know, Li Shuanghua specializes in the air and atmosphere. She can control the air pressure to form various high-speed air currents to attack. However, it's said that divine-level experts have wills that can directly interfere with the physical world. Their physical bodies are undying and indestructible. As long as their wills are present, they won't die. Only when their lifespan is up and their wills die will they truly die." Feng Xingjian nodded. "I'll make some arrangements here in 2 days' time. I'll then go into seclusion for 3 days. Once I come out, we'll head to Demonic City." The reason why Feng Xingjian was going into seclusion was because he was planning to integrate all his sword techniques in order to go up against a divine-level expert. Sensing the crazy killing intent hidden in Feng Xingjian's words, Feng Qian gulped. She knew that this time around, when he headed to Demonic City, there would probably be a real bloodbath. As he said that, Feng Xingjian turned to look at test subject number 13. "But before I leave, if I can turn number 13 into a clone, it'll be able to increase my battle prowess tremendously." If he could turn test subject number 13 into his clone, he would be able to increase his battle prowess by at least 50%. However, even Feng Qian and the others had not really succeeded in the technique of transferring consciousness. Therefore, they did not expect her to be able to help Feng Xingjian achieve it within a few days. However, Other than transferring consciousness, he had another method to take in this clone. Patting his bangle, Feng Xingjian asked, "Tyrant, you can engulf this clone, right?" "Me? Me?" Tyrant said in astonishment. "You're willing to let me devour this demigod clone?" "That's right. Among the three of us here, your chances of success are the highest," Feng Xingjian said. "This time around, when I return to Demonic City, I'll be going up against at least one divine-level expert. Although they are all Magic Prince warriors, and I have no idea why they are immune to the evil god's powers, having an additional demigod will still greatly increase my chances of success." Moreover, the first prince channeled the legacy of his 1,440 specialty seeds into this clone, allowing him to attain perfection in specialty seeds. "If I can get a clone, I'll be able to obtain information on all 1,440 specialty seeds." Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, Tyrant's heart suddenly burned with excitement. If he could devour this demigod doppelganger, he would be much stronger than he was originally. Thinking of this, he immediately agreed. "Sure, no problem. Leave it to me." However, Feng Xingjian's next words made Tyrant feel as if cold water had been poured over him. "It's fine for you to devour this demigod doppelganger, but if I sense that you have any other thoughts, don't blame me for killing you with a single sword attack." Therefore, over the next 2 days, Feng Xingjian started to settle the matters in the great western city. In the training room, Ferdinand, Anthony, Zhou Xingwen, and Anderson, who had just joined them, stood there quietly. Regardless of whether it was Ferdinand, the second transition Zhou Xingwen, or the arrogant Anderson, all of their gazes were filled with astonishment, respect, fear, nervousness, and other emotions as they looked at Feng Xingjian. Right now, the news of Feng Xingjian single-handedly defeating the combined forces of the Supreme Chief and the other two had already spread throughout the entire Great Western region. It had even spread to the surrounding regions. Some busybodies even praised Feng Xingjian as the #1 expert in the Great Western region, the #1 genius in the empire. When Ferdinand and the others looked at Feng Xingjian, they also felt a strong sense of distance. It was as if there was an invisible pressure pressing down on their hearts. Recently, when they did things, they would often be taken care of by various parties. There was almost no one in the Great Western region who dared not show Feng Xingjian any respect. Feng Xingjian's disciple, Lilia, stood next to Feng Xingjian. After going through the second level of the mystical prince transformation, her will had become even more immersed, and her strength had increased at a rapid rate. She could attain a breakthrough to the heavens perception realm at any moment and would have the chance to step into the second transition. Feng Xingjian looked at his team and said calmly, "How's the preparation of the materials?" The materials he was referring to were naturally the materials for the 8th, 9th, and 10th levels of the mystical prince. Hearing that, Anthony said, "I'm sorry, sir. We've only gathered the first list that you asked for. We're still lacking some crucial materials for the second and third lists." Feng Xingjian nodded. To be able to complete the 8th level of the mystical prince before heading to Demonic City was already a pleasant surprise for him. "Bring all the materials over later." He then continued to ask, "What about the forging of the divine remains equipment? Has the Wang clan agreed to it? They said that they need to make some preparations and might come in 2 weeks' time. Then they'll carry out some environmental preparations in the academy. It'll probably take 1 month." Feng Xingjian said, "Ask them to hurry up. I'll be going into seclusion for a period of time. I don't know how long exactly, but it might be 1 or 2 months. I might even be going into seclusion before the national selection." Hearing Feng Xingjian's words, everyone present was astonished. This was especially so for Anderson. When he heard that Feng Xingjian was going into seclusion again, he could not help but ask a question that everyone present had been very curious about. "Xingjian, are you already a demigod?" Feng Xingjian nodded and said, "1 tier of perfection." Hearing this, everyone present let out a deep breath. Lilia looked at Feng Xingjian passionately, feeling extremely proud. This was her master, a genius that had never appeared in the history of Miracle World. Zhou Xingwen said solemnly, "Xingjian, don't worry. during this period of time when you're not around will definitely help you with the rest of the matters. Regardless of whether it's the gathering of materials or the forging of the divine remains equipment, you can be at ease. Fang Xingjian nodded. Then, with a single thought, he distributed the first 3 levels of the mystical prince. Right now, almost all of his trusted subordinates had already received the modifications from the mystical prince. When they saw the first 3 levels of the mystical prince, all of them were overjoyed. This time around, no one is allowed to disturb me while I'm in seclusion. You guys can complete these 3 levels. Don't let others come and bully you when I'm not around, Ferdinand said with a smile. Don't worry, Xingjian. Right now, you're so famous that you're the #1 in sword arts in the Great Western region. Who would dare to not give you face? In reality, this was indeed the case. Right now, Ferdinand and the others were all definitely core characters in their own clans, let alone the outside world. This made them exclaim that they had made a good judgment back then and had decided to join Fang Xingjian. Fang Xingjian got the others to leave one by one. Then he looked at Lilia and said, Lilia, I'll help you comprehend the heaven's perception now. I hope that by the time I come out of seclusion, you'll have already stepped into the second transition. Regardless of whether Fang Xingjian's trip to Demonic City this time around was a success or not, the situation in Miracle World would only get increasingly dangerous in the future. Those below the second transition were basically just pure cannon fodder. With that, under Lilia's expression of anticipation, Fang Xingjian reached out his hand toward her head. Chapter 475. Over the next 2 days, Fang Xingjian passed down all the arrangements to his subordinates. The materials for the 9th and 10th levels of the Mystical Prince continued to be gathered, and the Eastern Sand region's Wang clan's team continued to make arrangements to make preparations to forge divine remains equipment. During these 2 days, Fang Xingjian had also let Lilia experience heaven's perception 3 times consecutively. After these 3 experiences, coupled with the effects of the Mystical Prince, Lilia entered a dazed state. It was as if she would step into a brand new realm at any moment. It was also during these 2 days that a tremendous amount of materials that could be used to speed up the condensation of specialty seeds were sent into Fang Xingjian's gates of the Netherworld. He brought them along with him at all times to help in the condensation of specialty seeds. Therefore, after making all the arrangements, Fang Xingjian announced to the public that he would be going into seclusion. However, during the few days when Fang Xingjian had suppressed the factions in the Great Western region, searched for a base, defeated number 10, and then returned to the Great Western region to make arrangements and go into seclusion, a man by the name of Tian Yi appeared out of nowhere in the Great Western City. This Tian Yi, who claimed to be the unparalleled sect master, displayed terrifying abilities the moment he appeared. He was not a demigod, but he was comparable to one. He challenged the 8 strongest martial techniques factions in the Great Western City. Not only did he not lose a single time, but he also defeated his opponents without needing a second move. However, what really made him famous was that he had headed to the Illumination Society's headquarters alone and defeated the Illumination Society's chief and many other experts who had just returned. He had also only used 2 moves to defeat the Illumination Society's chief. Although many of the Illumination Society's disciples claimed that the Illumination Society's chief had been seriously injured, a victory was a victory, and a defeat was a defeat. Tian Yi had become another genius expert of the Great Western region almost overnight. He then consecutively defeated the top 3 students from the Great Western Region Regional Academy, gaining even more fame. He was said to be the strongest genius amongst the younger generation in the Great Western region, with the exception of Fang Xingjian. Just as he was in the eye of the storm, he issued a challenge to Fang Xingjian, who was in seclusion. On the rooftop of the highest restaurant in the Great Western City, Tian Yi smiled as he looked at the scenery of the entire city. It was as if he wanted to bring the entire Great Western City into his embrace. Just then, the door behind him was pushed open slowly, and the Myriad Stars Palace's divine-level disciple, Holt, walked in slowly. The moment he entered, he frowned and asked, Brother Tianyi, why did you think of challenging Feng Xingjian? Holt and Tian had gotten to know each other at a gathering. Tian still held this divine-level expert's disciple in high regard. Moreover, Holt's Myriad Stars Palace had a long legacy and had taught Tian a lot of knowledge that Holt had not known before. This allowed him to understand a lot of information about demigods and divine-level experts. Holt's stalwart Eidolon conviction improved further and gained all sorts of unbelievable profoundness. Oh, why can't he challenge Feng Xingjian? Tianyi smiled and said, he's recognized as the strongest genius of this generation in the Great Western region, while I'm recognized as the second strongest. Of course, I have to challenge him and become the undisputed number one. But Feng Xingjian has defeated the Supreme Chief and the other two. His cultivation is already at the demigod level. Holt tried to persuade Tian to give up on the challenge. Why don't you train hard for a few more days and challenge him after you've stepped into the demigod realm? 2 days ago, I made a trip to the governor's manor at night. What? Holt lifted his head abruptly. The Great Western Region's Governor Devitt was a level 29 expert in the second tier. Although he had yet to step into the demigod realm, he was still very powerful and had profound killing techniques. Moreover, after he had learned Feng Xingjian's prodigious astral divine powers waves, he had become extremely powerful. To Holt, he was unfathomable. Holt asked nervously, "You fought with the governor?" Tianyi nodded and said, "We exchanged 3 moves. Just as I was about to defeat him, another 2 experts who were not much weaker than him came. However, they weren't the key. With my current cultivation, it would only take me a little more effort to defeat them. However, I sensed that there was a vast consciousness hidden in the governor's manor. He focused his attention on me. If I were to continue fighting, I wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand. Therefore, I retreated." Hearing Tianyi's words, Holt's heart was in turmoil. He had not expected Tian to be so daring. Holt guessed that the 2 experts who were not much weaker than Devitt should be the governor from 2 generations ago, as well as the current deputy governor. As for the hidden consciousness that Tian had mentioned, it's a good thing that you didn't make a move against that powerful hidden consciousness. It's very likely that it's the second prince's thought across 1,000 li. The second prince? Tian let out a soft laugh and said, "I'll have to fight him sooner or later." Holt sighed. "To think that you were able to retreat so easily from the governor and the other 2. It's true that you have some hope of fighting against Feng Xingjian. However, Feng Xingjian has defeated the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief after all. His sword arts are unfathomable." Hearing Holt's worries, the smile on Tianyi's face became increasingly confident and at ease. He took 1 step at a time, and with each step he took, the surrounding space seemed to be trembling. It was as if the space was shattering, and the ground under his feet seemed to have turned into seawater, undulating incessantly. Under Holt's astonished gaze, the colors in the space were peeled off bit by bit, just like a broken television lens. The surface of the scene shattered, and the entire space turned from a room in a restaurant to a street in the Great Western Region. Seeing that he had turned from a restaurant into a street, and that the people around him were not the least bit surprised, Holt looked at Tian in astonishment and asked, "What on earth did you do?" Ever since he told me about how powerful demigods and divine-level experts are, I've thought about it for a very long time and finally understood something. Tian, he said slowly. There's a limit to one's physical strength, but only one's will can become infinitely powerful. Because of this, I've also comprehended the true profoundness of the stalwart Eidolon conviction. In the past, I focused all my attention on the power of my physical body. It was extremely foolish. To slay a person, one must first slay their soul. Compared to attacking the physical body, it's far inferior to attacking the consciousness directly. As Holt spoke, the scene before him kept on changing. There were streets, plains, rivers, and snowy mountains. Various scenes appeared before him, as if he was looking at flowers on horseback. No matter how he performed his heaven's perception and how sharp his 5 senses were, he was unable to detect any abnormalities. Holt said in astonishment, "You've completely taken control of my consciousness." "That's right. A fight between cultivators is a fight between wills, Tion, he said calmly. In the path of knights, the will is number one, and my stalwart Eidolon conviction excels in the use of the power of the will. As long as I'm willing to, I can let you see or feel anything I want you to feel right now. I call this move God's perception. Holt's eyes were wide open as he saw the surrounding space changing rapidly. The entire land continued to shrink and eventually appeared in Tion Yi's palm. This is the power of the number one in the world. Right now, Tion Yi had almost completely given up on strengthening his physical body. He had completely transferred the powers of the stalwart Eidolon conviction to his spirit and will, and they had become unbelievably powerful. On the day that Tion Yi challenged Fang Xingjian to a battle, Zhou Xingwen stood outside Fang Xingjian's training room and mumbled to himself. As expected, Xingjian still isn't going to come out to fight. Just as he was thinking of this, he lowered his head and saw that a letter had unknowingly appeared in his hand. He did not even realize when this letter had landed in his hands. Similarly, even though he had not heard Fang Xingjian speaking to him, he knew that this letter was something that Fang Xingjian had wanted him to hand to Tion Yi. It was as if this matter had existed in his memories all along. Chapter 476. In the arena, Tion Yi sat there with one hand propping up his chin. His eyes were empty, but no one knew what he was thinking about. Below the arena, people from all walks of life had already crowded the place. Even Governor Devitt was hidden among the crowd. The governor from 2 generations ago, who was also the current head of the Sword Arts Department, James, stood next to him and said, "Was this the lad who spied on the governor that night?" "That's him." Governor Devitt took a long look at Tion Yi and said, "Although this person has yet to step into the demigod level, his martial will is so powerful that it is unprecedented. Even ordinary demigods probably do not have martial wills as strong as his." Head of Department James looked at Tion Yi, who was on the stage, and felt a strong sense of confidence gushing forth. It was as if no matter where Tion Yi stood, he would have an extremely strong sense of existence. It was as if he was the center of the entire world, or even the entire universe at all times. Head of Department James had never felt such a strong feeling from anyone before. This guy is probably really Xingjian's opponent. James frowned and said, "What did His Second Highness say?" Governor Devitt said, "His Highness said that this person has a mysterious background and that the martial techniques he cultivates are beyond the norm. He asked us not to go head-on against him for now." Hildebrand, who was originally ranked 3rd in the academy, had been in a daze ever since he returned to the great western city. Even when he was challenged and defeated by Tion Yi, he did not reveal any special expression. However, he had especially come to watch the battle between Tion Yi and Fang Xingjian today. Fang Xingjian's sword arts are probably the best under the divine level, Hildebrand said with a sigh. "I wonder how many moves Tion Yi can take." Just then, Holt darted out from the side, looked at Hildebrand, and said, "That might not be the case." Holt, looking at Holt's mysterious expression, Hildebrand felt a little curious. "You're very familiar with this Tion Yi?" Holt smiled and looked at Tion Yi, his eyes filled with admiration. "I've also seen Fang Xingjian's sword technique and had wanted to catch up to him. However, ever since I found out that he had defeated the School of Sword Art Supreme Chief, I know that this person is a genius born to be. He'll become a tyrant in the future, and I'll probably never be able to catch up to him in this lifetime. But after getting to know Tion Yi, I finally understand what it means to be a genius among geniuses. Even Fang Xingjian will only be a tyrant in the future, while Tion Yi's talent can be said to be a martial arts legend. In the future, he will probably be able to dominate the world and be an existence who can move unhindered in the world." Looking at the fervent gaze in Holt's eyes, Hildebrand rubbed his nose, shook his head, and said, "Holt, you're exaggerating. Fang Xingjian's abilities aren't something you can imagine." Neither of them believed what the other said. They shook their heads and focused their attention on the stage. On the other side of the arena, Lilia looked coldly at Tion Yi and let out a cold snort. To think that a clown would dare to challenge Master. Standing next to her was Cursed City Lord, who had rushed over to visit Lilia. He stood next to his daughter, sensing her unceasingly fluctuating consciousness. It was as if she would step into a brand new realm at any moment. Cursed City Lord asked in surprise, "Lily, you're about to attain heaven's perception? It's all thanks to Master's guidance." Speaking of her master, Lilia's heart was filled with respect. Master's abilities have already reached an unbelievable level. If he were to come today, he'd probably be able to deal with Tian E with a single move. However, Cursed City Lord was a little doubtful. No matter how powerful Feng Xingjian was, Tian E was not someone to be underestimated. To say that he would be able to deal with Tian E with a single move, that was too arrogant. However, looking at the look of respect on his daughter's face, he was not willing to rebut or argue with her. He was only thinking of how to persuade Lilia. He instinctively felt that it was not a good thing for his daughter to worship a man like this. Countless people below the arena were whispering to each other. However, Feng Xingjian had the battle record of defeating the Supreme Chief. Although Tian Yi had appeared out of nowhere, the opponents he had defeated were naturally far from being comparable to the Supreme Chief. Therefore, most people thought highly of Feng Xingjian, especially those from the martial arts factions who had been defeated by Tian Yi. Right now, they were looking at Tian Yi with gloating gazes. Just then, Tian Yi suddenly stood up, and a look of understanding appeared in his eyes. "So that's how it is. So that's how it is. I understand now." As he murmured to himself, he laughed out maniacally at the next moment. "I, Tian Yi, am really the strongest." The next moment, the martial will that represented Tian Yi radiated out in all directions with his body as the center. There was clearly no wind, no flow of air, and no explosions. However, everyone felt as if a tempest had suddenly appeared. The tempest gushed forth, seeming to want to blow their bodies apart and tear their consciousness apart. After this tempest passed, everyone discovered to their surprise that they were no longer able to control their bodies. Within a range of 1,000 meters, everyone's consciousness was suppressed by Tian Yi, and their physical bodies were taken over by Tian Yi. This was the case even for Governor Devitt and head of Department James. At the next moment, everyone made the exact same actions and smiles. Tian Yi had taken complete control of their physical bodies. Everyone strives for justice. To kill a person, one must first kill a god. You're all blind and mediocre people. You don't understand at all. Everyone's faces revealed the same ecstasy and excitement. It was the ecstasy and excitement that Tian Yi felt after attaining yet another breakthrough in his stalwart Eidolon conviction. After Tian Yi had swept through the great western city and obtained a portion of the divine-level profoundness, he had a deeper understanding of himself as the top in the world. He attained another breakthrough, causing his martial will to become unbelievably powerful. He could even seize the physical bodies of everyone within a range of 1,000 meters with a single thought. You guys don't understand at all. The will is the most important, and the physical body is just a tool. As long as I'm willing, my spirit can continue to live on. Even if I don't have a physical body, even if I'm dismembered into a million pieces, as long as my spirit and my will still exist, I'll be able to continue living on. I can even seize the physical bodies of others as I wish. No matter how powerful everything else is, it's just a bunch of external objects. At the next moment, everyone felt as if their bodies had returned to their control. However, no one said a word, nor did anyone move. Everyone looked at Tian Yi in great terror, imagining the technique he had performed earlier. They only felt endless terror in their hearts. Such a marvelous technique. Governor Devitt's countenance was extremely grim. However, he kept on recalling the process of his body being controlled earlier, not knowing how Tian Yi had managed to do it. Hildebrand looked at Tian Yi in a daze. Behind him, Holt sighed and said, "Did you see that? This is Tian Yi. His talent is something I've never seen before. Compared to Feng Xingjian's talent in sword arts, what Tian Yi has comprehended is the true great way of heaven and man. It's a path to the divine level that no one has ever taken before." The countenances of Lilia, Kerr's city lord, and head of department James all changed drastically. They looked at Tian Yi as if they were looking at a monster. This was the scene that Zhou Xingwen saw after arriving. He frowned, but did not care too much about it. He held on to Fang Xingzhan's letter and slowly entered the venue under everyone's astonished gazes, heading in Tian Yi's direction. Chapter 477. Looking at everyone's gazes, Zhou Xingwen said calmly, Xingzhan is going into seclusion, so he won't be coming over. However, he has brought you a letter. Oh, has he surrendered? When Tian Yi heard this, he felt that it was only natural. To him, he was the world's #1, and there was no way for Fang Xingzhan to win against him. What else could he do if he did not surrender? However, it did not matter to him. He merely said, I heard that Fang Xingzhan is the #1 swordsman in the Great Western region and wanted to spar with him to verify my path of cultivation. However, I've already attained a new breakthrough. Even if he were to come and fight it out with me, it would just be boring. It doesn't matter whether we fight or not. Hearing that Fang Xingzhan did not even dare to come over, everyone's gazes were filled with surprise. As for him going into seclusion to cultivate, they felt that it was just an excuse. If someone were to come over to challenge you, and you did not come out to accept it, then wouldn't you be throwing away your reputation and status? Moreover, the challenger was not some random nobody, but Tian Yi, who had defeated almost the entire Great Western City. In everyone's opinion, Fang Xingzhan was avoiding the battle. Hildebrand looked at this scene in disbelief. To think that Fang Xingzhan, who seemed to be extremely powerful and had unfathomable sword arts, was avoiding the battle. This was unbelievable. Although the power Tian Yi had displayed earlier was very strong, it could not be said to be completely superior to number 10's evil will. Hildebrand could not understand why Fang Xingzhan would choose to avoid the battle. Holt shook his head and said, I had thought that Fang Xingzhan's sword arts had always been advancing bravely and courageously, advancing with indomitable will. To think that there would be times when he would be afraid. Thinking of this, he could not help but sigh. I had thought that in this generation's Great Western region, he and I are the main characters. In the end, Tian Yi appeared out of nowhere and snatched away our glory. Just as everyone thought that Fang Xingzhan was avoiding the battle, Zhou Xingwen continued to walk toward Tian Yi and said, I don't know what Xingzhan means either, but he asked me to personally hand this letter to you. Letter? I'm not interested in Fang Xingzhan. Tian Yi shook his head and said, I'll be heading to the Myriad Stars Palace next to discuss the path of cultivation with the astral ancestor. When everyone heard that Tian Yi wanted to head to the Myriad Stars Palace to discuss the path of cultivation with the astral ancestor, they were all extremely astonished. Holt also smiled and said in a clear voice, Our Myriad Stars Palace is going to hold the Myriad Stars ceremony and has already invited the School of Sword Art's previous Supreme Chief, Sword Zhan Hongshan, as well as the ancient path of Hell's current sect master, the Abyss Lord, as well as the 8 directional Crimson Dragons leader to have an exchange on the path of night cultivation. Grandmaster is also very impressed by Brother Tiany's talent. Therefore, he invited Brother Tiany to join him for an exchange. Holt's Grandmaster was the astral ancestor, the previous Supreme Chief of the School of Sword Arts who had been training in seclusion all this time. The current Supreme Chief, Hung Tianxiao's master, Sword Slash of the secular world, the ancient path of Hell's Abyss Lord, and the 8 directional Crimson Dragons leader. The 4 of them were all part of the Empire's 10 great divine level experts. Hearing that they were going to meet and that they had even invited Tian Yi over for an exchange, everyone's gazes toward Tian Yi changed. To them, Tian Yi's value had skyrocketed. However, Zhou Xingwen seemed as if he did not hear them and continued to walk toward Tian Yi. Tian Yi frowned and said, Didn't I say that if you believe me, I won't read it? But Xingzhan said that I must hand the letter to you personally. Seeing how stubborn Zhou Xingwen was, Tian Yi laughed out loud, shook his head, and said a little impatiently, All right, I want to see what this Fang Xingzhan has written for me to have to read it personally. As he spoke, he appeared before Zhou Xingwen with a flash. His speed was so fast that it was astonishing. Then, with a flash of his left hand, he grabbed out toward the letter in Zhou Xingwen's hand. However, even though it was such a simple process, he came to an abrupt halt. It was because as he continued to stretch out his hand, Tian, he sensed an extremely great pressure descending from the heavens, pressing down on his heart. It was not something real like gravity or a human's pushing force. Instead, it was a purely psychological pressure pressing down on Tian Yi's heart, as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on it. Trying to play with my will? Tian Yi's consciousness condensed slightly, and a gush of martial will exploded, causing that heavy feeling to slowly dissipate. However, it did not dissipate for long. As his hand once again got close to the letter, that heavy feeling grew stronger. This time around, he was not the only one who felt this heavy feeling. Everyone within a range of over 10 meters also felt waves of pressure coming from the bottom of their hearts. What a powerful will! Tian Yi sensed how powerful the will contained in the letter was. He no longer held back and unleashed all of his martial will explosively, extending one of his hands out toward the letter at an accelerated speed. This round was a clash between Tian Yi's and Fang Xingzhan's martial wills across space. Everyone within a range of 100 meters seemed to feel their hearts pounding. Over half of them felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on their heads, and with a bang, they dropped to their knees. They were unable to exert any strength or stand up. Tian Yi, who had received the letter, felt the heaviness of the situation even more deeply. If it could be said that there had only been a mountain pressing down on his heart earlier, then right now he felt as if there was a huge mountain range pressing down on his body. His body trembled incessantly, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He slowly dropped to his knees, inch by inch. You want me to kneel down to you? It's impossible even if you come personally, let alone a letter. The stalwart Eidolon conviction was something that would become stronger the more persistent one was. Not only did the pressure brought about by Fang Xingzhan's letter not crush Tian Yi, it even aroused the pride in his heart. Tian Yi's martial will grew stronger once again, reaching almost 120% effectiveness. He managed to stand up straight despite the extremely heavy pressure in his heart. After forcefully withstanding the impact of Fang Xingzhan's will, Tian Yi exhaled softly and smiled coldly as he looked at the letter before him. Then, with a move of his finger, he opened the envelope and took out the letter. The letter was empty, with only 4 words written by the edge of sword. He had to be convinced. An explosive boom rang out, and as the 4 words appeared before Fang Xingzhan's eyes, an extremely tremendous pressure came gushing forth. There were no powers that interfered with the physical world. It was purely a collision of martial wills and an attack of information currents. However, if it had been a stretch of mountain range earlier, then right now, it was as if the entire land was pressing down on him. Tian Yi let out a furious bellow, but he continued to drop to his knees. However, when his knees were 1 inch away from the ground, he forcefully stopped. He gritted his teeth, and all the muscles throughout his body trembled crazily. Under the crazy reinforcement from the stalwart Eidolon conviction, his will reached 140%. Roar! He tore fiercely with both hands, tearing Fang Xingzhan's letter into pieces. However, with this, the pressure did not lessen. Countless sword light flashed, moving back and forth at the spot where the letter had disappeared. The sword light formed 4 big words, and each word was bright. They soared into the air, lighting up the area within a range of 1,000 meters. A terrifying pressure came gushing forth. If it could be said that the pressure earlier was like a mound, a mountain range, or the earth, then right now, as the 4 big words formed by the sword light came gushing forth, it was as if the entire sky had collapsed. Mountains and earth could explode and shatter, but what could one do when the entire sky came pressing down? With an agonizing cry, Tian Yi dropped to his knees, bleeding from his 7 apertures. Simultaneously, as the 4 big words soared into the air, banging sounds rang out incessantly, and rows of people dropped to their knees. Within a few seconds, everyone who had come to watch this battle, regardless of whether they were men or women, young or old, had dropped to their knees. Only Zhou Xingwen, who had sent the letter, remained standing in the middle. However, his expression was that of a dazed one. In the distance, Holt also dropped to his knees, looking at the 4 big words in the sky in a daze. "Can't I be convinced?" In that instant, he felt as if his body had been pierced through by countless sharp swords, and he was in so much pain that his countenance turned pale. The surroundings of the arena fell silent, and only the 4 big words shone in the sky. Tiani looked at the 4 big words in the sky with bloodshot eyes, looking extremely embarrassed and furious. He let out a furious bellow, wanting to stand up. However, no matter how he moved, no matter how much he unleashed his martial will explosively, it was as if the sky had collapsed and was pressing down on him. That tremendous psychological pressure caused him to be unable to move at all, let alone stand up. Such a psychological blow would be destructive even to ordinary people, let alone to someone like Tian Yi, who had cultivated the stalwart Eidolon conviction. Finally, accompanied by a heart-wrenching and agonizing cry, Tian Yi's vision turned black, and he fainted. On this day, countless people in the great western city could only choose to drop to their knees in submission when faced with the terrifying sword intent that could not be fended off and defied. Chapter 478. After this battle, no one in the great western city, or even the entire great western region, dared to challenge Fang Xingjian. As for the original challenger, Tian Yi, by the time people remembered him, he had already disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he had gone to. Anderson did not go to watch the battle in the arena at all. Firstly, he knew that Fang Xingjian had no intention of going over. Secondly, he knew that it was impossible for that Tian Yi to be Fang Xingjian's match. It was because Fang Xingjian had gone through 3 consecutive days of seclusion cultivation and had successfully integrated all of his sword arts together. His cultivation was now unfathomable. Anderson stood outside the training room and realized that he was no longer able to get closer. It was because with each step he took, he would feel as if his mind was being pierced by needles. It was as if countless swords were stirring up in his mind. The closer he got, the stronger this feeling became. Right now, at a distance of 10 meters, it seemed to be his limit. Is 10 meters the limit? A hint of dejection flashed on Anderson's face. However, this dejection soon turned into fighting spirit. He sat down cross-legged and slowly trained his martial will through the incessant impact from Fang Xingjian's sword intents. He had been doing this for 3 consecutive days. It was through these rounds of training that he had a deep understanding of how powerful Fang Xingjian was. In the sacred land, 3 figures were sitting cross-legged. One of them was a lady with a sexy figure and fair skin. She looked at the 2 people before her with a solemn expression. Of the 2 people sitting cross-legged before her, one of them was dressed in gray robes and had a feminine face. Gray light flashed explosively in his eyes, filled with all sorts of sinister, eerie, and brutal information. The other person was dressed in white robes. His eyes were extremely indifferent, as if there were no emotions left in his heart. However, if one were to take a closer look, they would be able to sense that there seemed to be countless sword lights flashing in his eyes. The man dressed in white robes was naturally Fang Xingjian, who had gone into seclusion for 3 days and had finally melded all of his sword arts together. During the past 3 days, he had not done anything else and had focused all of his attention on fusing his sword arts together. He had fused all of his sword arts together, turning them into an extraordinary sword technique that was known as the 4 god-slaying swords. This was not all. For 3 consecutive days, he had also exchanged cultivation experiences with Fang Qian and Tyrant, sitting down and discussing, gaining a deeper understanding of cultivation. After all, the 3 of them were geniuses in the cultivation of knights, magic prints, and black magic. They had reached the pinnacle of level 29 and had a deep understanding of their own paths. After the exchange, each of them had great gains. 4 god-slaying swords. 4 God-slaying swords. Fang Qian looked at Fang Xingjian with a grim countenance and said, "To slay a person, one must first slay the spirit." It's true that the potential of the will is stronger than that of the physical body. It's because the will itself is not bound by the material world. Your 4 God-slaying swords not only aims to slay a person's soul, but it also has the intention of slaying a God-level expert. That's right. Fang Xingjian nodded and said, "This time around, that test subject number 10's attack methods have given me a lot of inspiration. Compared to a competition of physical strength, there are all sorts of attacks with special effects, such as slashing, flames, lightning, and low temperatures. Martial will that moves at light speed might be the strongest attack method. Right now, I can destroy the souls of ordinary second transition conferred knights with a single thought. Their consciousness would be completely wiped out, and they would become vegetative. But the physical body is equally important. Right now, Tyrant had completely engulfed that test subject number 13 who had attained 2 tiers of perfection. As he spoke, he exuded the auras of 1,440 specialty seeds, and seething power was emitted from his body. The spirit is the spirit of the physical body, and the physical body is the root of the spirit. The strengthening of the will cannot be separated from the nourishment of the physical body. If one wants their consciousness and will to continue to grow stronger, the nourishment of the physical body is a must." Tyron sighed and said, "After engulfing this body for the past few days, I can increasingly feel the benefits of having a powerful physical body. A powerful physical body will provide powerful nourishment and energy. My brain will be even more developed, and the power of my consciousness will naturally be even stronger. The two affect each other, and it can be said to be mutually beneficial." "That's right." Fang Qian nodded and said, "In order to attain the divine level, one must make one's will strong enough to affect the physical world. Regardless of whether it's knights, magic prince, or black magic, all of them must take this step. It's just that knights nourish the physical body, using the breakthrough of the physical body to bring about a breakthrough of the brain's consciousness. At the instant one strives to attain the divine level, one will condense the consciousness with the power of the physical body's perfection, turning all the vital energy and blood in the body into the power of the will, thereby attaining a breakthrough to the divine level." Tyron smiled and nodded. "And magic prince borrow the reinforcement from the gods beyond the heavens. It's the same as absorbing the gods' powers and continuously turning them into one's own. As long as one's physical body meets the minimum requirements and has sufficient nourishment for the brain, one will be able to directly absorb the gods' powers and turn them into the power of the will to attain a breakthrough to the divine level." Fang Xingjian continued, "Black magic is very similar to magic prince. It's just that through various tactics, one obtains 12 different types of external powers. Through these external powers, one can elevate one's will and eventually attain a breakthrough to the divine level." Fang Xingjian concluded, "The path of knights cultivates one's own powers, accumulating them before unleashing them. The initial effects will be slow, but the chances of one attaining a breakthrough to the divine level are higher. Magic prince and black magic, on the other hand, cultivate the powers of others. The goal is to turn the powers of the gods beyond the heavens into one's own. One will be able to borrow the powers of the gods from the heavens right from the start. Therefore, the initial effects will be fast. However, it's extremely difficult to turn the powers of the gods into one's own. Therefore, the chances of one attaining a breakthrough to the divine level in the later stages are very low." After 3 consecutive days of communication, the 3 of them had a deeper understanding of the path of cultivation. They also had a clearer plan for their future. Fang Qian looked at Fang Xingjian and said, "Have you still decided to go to Demonic City? Although the powers of Magic Prince and Black Magic are unable to be used directly on you, a divine level expert is a divine level expert after all. We don't know if they still have any other hidden means or powers. If I don't go to Demonic City this time around, I won't be able to feel at ease. As Fang Xingjian said that, he stood up. Sword force permeated throughout his body, passing through all of his joints, nerves, and blood vessels. There were even hints of sword light moving around his body. Right now, Fang Xingjian's abilities in all aspects had improved tremendously once again. After breaking into the first prince's base, his mental cultivation method had leveled up, reaching level 8. His attributes and specialties had also improved once again, and his sword arts had also improved by leaps and bounds. All the sword techniques that could be fused had been fused into a set, turning into the 4 god-slaying swords. Amongst the 4 god-slaying swords, other than the first sword, Rebirth, which increased one's potential and tempered one's attributes, the other 3 swords were each more powerful than the one before. All of them were born for killing and destruction. Right now, Fang Xingjian's attributes had become: name Fang Xingjian, age 18, occupation Heavenly Sword, sovereign level 29 strength, 295 plus 19 agility, 307 plus 19 reaction, 211 endurance, 190 flexibility, 190 ether synchronization rate, 100%. The attributes above come into effect once the prodigious astral divine powers waves is activated. Due to perfect muscles, plus 19 in strength and agility, 10% of the endurance attribute, skills/techniques, boundaries negation, level 44 god-slaying swords, level 12 ether divine art, white bone divine weapon, heaven's volition sword in 10 internal specialties, 243 external specialties. 8 waves level 8 prodigious astral divine powers waves mental cultivation method level 8 universal sword dominance lunisolar. Fang Xingjian looked at Fang Qian and Tyrant and said, "This time around, Tyrant will accompany me. Fang Qian, you'll stay here and help me hold down the fort in the Great Western region. However, you better not be up to any tricks. Otherwise, I'll settle things with you when I return." With that, Fang Xingjian tapped out with a finger. An afterimage flashed past on Tyrant's and Fang Qian's foreheads. 2 streams of information currents, or rather, sword intents, gushed into their minds. The sword intents were so powerful and condensed that they were like the ones in the letter Fang Xingjian had sent to Tianyi. It was something that Fang Qian and Tyrant were unable to go up against. Fang Qian let out a bitter laugh, knowing that Fang Xingjian still did not trust her. However, Tyrant smiled nonchalantly. Therefore, on one day in February, Fang Qian was the only one left, while Fang Xingjian and Tyrant disappeared from the sacred land. 2 silhouettes cut across the sky at a speed several tens of times that of supersonic speed, heading in the direction of the Western Sea. Fang Qian understood that with this operation, Fang Xingjian would probably turn the entire demonic city, or even the entire earth, upside down. Chapter 479. Below a luxurious apartment in the city center of Demonic City, Jessica smiled and greeted the guy in front of her. It was a guy who also had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was tall and slender, wearing a custom-made suit that cost thousands of dollars. He smiled and said to Jessica, "Why? Aren't you going to invite me up?" Jessica smiled brightly. "Let's forget about it today. My younger sister is still around. I'll invite you up the next time she's not around." The man smiled and teased Jessica a little more. Then he got into a sports car and left amidst the roaring sound of the engine. Looking at the gradually disappearing tail lights of the sports car, Jessica let out a sigh of relief. Few done. Thinking of his income, family background, and his magic prince abilities, Jessica broke into a satisfied smile. Gustav is not bad, just that he's a little fickle. With a good mood, Jessica slowly walked up the elevator. With a height of 1.8 meters, a pair of long legs, and a head of brilliant blonde hair, the security guard at the entrance gulped. Jessica slowly arrived at her apartment. This apartment was bought by her and a cousin. Although they were both members of the Medici clan, one of the 5 great clans, she and her cousin were just members of a declining branch of the clan. They could not rely on the clan's power to do anything. In fact, they could be said to be powerless and could only ensure that others would not bully them. If not for that incident 2 years ago, she would not have been able to buy this apartment with her cousin. Moreover, she had been promoted, jumping 3 levels consecutively, and had become the deputy chief of the district police station. She had even gone through a job transition at public expense, becoming a second transition level 29 expert. After all, as long as a Magic Prince warrior had sufficient resources, they would be able to go through a job transition at will. Unless they took the initiative to train their attributes and specialties, they would be able to reach level 29 the moment they went through the job transition. Jessica was naturally not a warrior who trained hard. Therefore, the moment she became the deputy chief and went through a job transition at public expense, she had chosen to go straight to level 29. However, thinking of the incident 2 years ago, Jessica's brows were still furrowed slightly, and there seemed to be a hint of guilt in her eyes. Shaking her head, as if wanting to shake away these worries, Jessica opened the door and said with a smile, "Mary, I'm back. Gustav sent me back. Hee. I feel that he's smitten with me." However, when she entered the room, she discovered that the entire apartment was dark, and there wasn't even any sound to respond to her. The instant she stepped into the apartment, Jessica's hair stood on end. She felt as if she had stepped into a demon's den. Countless malicious and evil thoughts were coiling around her body. It was as if she had arrived at a demonic realm in hell. Jessica was worthy of being a policewoman for many years. She took another deep breath and stabilized her mind. She carefully observed the situation in the room and found a black shadow sitting quietly on the sofa. The room was too dark, so she could not see who was sitting on the sofa. She could only see that the other party seemed to be wearing a strange bracelet on his wrist. Jessica could feel that all the evil thoughts were coming from the man's bracelet. Jessica said indifferently, "May I know who you are? I'm Jessica from the Medici family. If you've entered my apartment by mistake, please leave now. I promise I won't pursue the matter." After all, she was already the deputy chief and a second transition level 29 Magic Prince warrior. Even if the other party's aura was astonishing, she was still able to deal with it calmly. The other party said coldly, "Jessica, it's only been a short 2 years. Do you already not recognize me?" As the voice rang out, the darkness gradually receded and light once again enveloped the entire room, revealing Fong Xingjian, who was lying on the sofa, as well as Fong Xingjian's cousin, who was sitting upright next to him. Looking at her cousin, who was staring blankly at the wall, and then looking at Fong Xingjian's face, Jessica's countenance changed drastically as she shouted, "Fong Xingjian, to think that it's you! How did I not die?" Fong Xingjian looked at Jessica like a cat toying with a mouse and said, "Back then, you brought me to the harbor and sold me out to the black devils from the Onassis clan. Just for a few million, just to buy a house like this?" As he spoke, Fong Xingjian's eyes swept past the police uniform that Jessica was wearing and said, "Oh, you've been promoted? It's also the work of those black devils?" If Jessica had turned pale with fright when she first saw Fong Xingjian, then a moment later, she had calmed down and did not show any signs of panic. After all, the person who had come looking for her was just Fong Xingjian. In Jessica's opinion, Fong Xingjian did not have any talent, background, or resources. Toward Fong Xingjian, Jessica merely felt guilty. She said, "Fong Xingjian, I know that I've let you down in the past, but you should also understand that with your abilities being sandwiched between the Fong clan and the Onassis clan, even without me, you wouldn't have had a good ending." Saying that, she sighed and took out a bank card from her bag, handing it to Fong Xingjian. "Take it. There's 2 million in this card. Take it as me returning you the money. You should leave Demonic City quickly. Right now, the Fong clan's influence in Demonic City is very strong. Once that grandmother of yours finds out about you, you'll be finished." Seeing that Fong Xingjian did not move or speak, merely looking at her with a mocking expression, Jessica frowned. "You think it's too little?" She shook her head and said, "Xingjian, don't throw a tantrum like a child. I know that you feel aggrieved, but this is the reality of the world. Those with power control everything. If you continue to create trouble in Demonic City, you'll only be digging your own grave. Why don't you forget everything after you get out and use this 2 million to live a good life? Forget about the Fong clan and forget about the Onassis clan. That kind of great power isn't something we can go up against. Hearing Jessica's words, Fang Xingjian's lips broke into a soundless smile. He did not move, merely opening his mouth and saying, "With your attitude, I think it's better for you to kneel and talk to me first." Jessica's brows twitched, and she was about to fly into a rage. However, with Fang Xingjian's words, an extremely heavy pressure descended from the heavens. That kind of mental heaviness caused her to kneel down, and with a loud bang, cracks appeared on the ground. How is this possible? Jessica looked at this scene in astonishment. I'm already a level 29 electric envoy. To think that you could make me fall with just a single thought. How on earth did you do it? Fang Xingjian shook his head. Jessica, don't you understand? If I didn't have absolute power, how could I have come back? My current power isn't something you can guess. Chapter 480. After hearing Fang Xingjian's words, Jessica did not give up. With a whistle, electricity flashed all over her body, and she stood up with a brilliant glow. With a dash, she appeared before Fang Xingjian, and the streams of thunderbolts in her hands turned into lightning arcs. They were like a lightning-long spear, piercing out toward Fang Xingjian with a destructive prowess that could destroy an entire street. Her psychological state had been suppressed, but she could rely on the electrical signals that controlled her physical body to bypass her consciousness and direct her physical body to attack through a neural network. Looking at Jessica's attack, Fang Xingjian shook his head slightly. It's true that one can learn Magic Prince very quickly. Even with Jessica's aptitude, she was able to reach level 29 within 2 years. But it's too difficult to attain the divine level through Magic Prince. The number of divine level experts on Earth cannot be compared to the number of divine level experts in an empire in Miracle World. And a divine level expert can manifest their will and even affect the physical world. So what if there are several 100,000 or millions of level 29 experts? In Miracle World, there is no need for ordinary people to participate in wars. The lowest level of war was a competition between level 19 knights. Second transition conferred knights could already decide the direction of a battle, and divine level experts could already change the outcome of any battle, deciding the future of history. It could be said that when two forces clashed, only divine level experts could go up against divine level experts, and second transition experts could go up against second transition experts. Only then would there be a situation where a first transition expert would go up against a first transition expert. Moreover, the outcome of a first transition expert going up against a first transition expert would not be able to affect the outcome of a divine level expert going up against a divine level expert. The difference of one level was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. The strongest expert was irreplaceable, and the people at the top would affect those at the bottom. However, those at the bottom would not be able to change the situation at the top. As Fang Xingjian's abilities continued to rise, he was beginning to understand this more and more. As long as the number of divine level experts on Earth did not increase by several times, they would not dare to enter Miracle World on a large scale. After all, once Magic Prince were revealed to the world and they became the Mage Association's allies, the Holy Sea of Truth would probably not be able to sit still. They were a massive organization that had over 30 divine level experts, including Guardian Kings and Divine Sons. They could crush all the other forces in Miracle World. Moreover, Jessica's performance was just as Fang Qian had said. Magic Prince borrowed the powers of evil gods beyond the heavens, and such powers were a lot weaker on Earth. This caused the battle prowess of Magic Prince warriors to be a far cry from their performance in Miracle World. However, it was the same for knights as well. The ether particle density in Demonic City was only 1/10 of that in Miracle World. Fang Xingjian's body and will did not change, but the lightning, fire, and vibration effects in battle were more than 10 times weaker. In Demonic City, it's still more effective to fight with one's physical body and will. While he was thinking about this, Jessica's Thunderbolt Spear had already arrived an inch in front of Fang Xingjian. In the next moment, it would hit his eyeball. However, in Jessica's eyes, Fang Xingjian was still in a daze and had yet to react. Don't blame me. You can only blame yourself for being too immature. But in the next moment, Jessica's eyes widened as she looked at the scene before her in disbelief. Her lightning spear had completely pierced through Fang Xingjian's eyeball. Her entire finger was pressed against his eyeball, but it was useless. She felt as if she had pressed against a slightly soft steel plate, and the strange sensation brought about a powerful rebound. She let out a pained cry and retracted her palm. However, she saw that 3 of her fingers were completely twisted. The bones in them were all broken, and even the tendons were completely torn apart. Fang Xingjian then tapped out with a finger, pressing it against her head. Jessica only felt a powerful consciousness and a sword intent that flashed with endless sword light gushing down from the top of her head. In the blink of an eye, it went through her entire body, as if it would be able to tear her apart at any moment. She still wanted to resist, but a pain as if 10,000 swords were piercing through her heart, causing her to cry out agonizingly as she fell to the ground. From then on, whenever she had the thought of resisting, the feeling of 10,000 swords piercing through her heart would come gushing in waves. Jessica spent 10 minutes to get used to this state, and she no longer dared to have any thoughts of resisting. Her countenance was pale, her eye sockets sunk in, and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. It was as if she had just gone through a serious illness. She looked at Fang Xingjian as if she was looking at a demon. "What did you do to me? I've channeled a stream of sword intent into your body. As long as you show any signs of enmity toward me, he'll let you have a taste of suffering. The longer the enmity is maintained, the greater the pain will be until your enmity dissipates," Fang Xingjian said as he looked at Fang Xingjian coldly. "Now, let me ask you a few questions." Hearing Fang Xingjian's words, Jessica was horrified. Fang Xingjian's current strength was already unfathomable to her. She had never sensed such power from any other magic prince warrior, as if he was toying with her in the palm of his hand. Even the demonic city police's chief did not seem to have such abilities. Fang Xingjian asked, "How's the Fang clan situation now? Where's Li Shuanghua?" Ever since her younger brother entered the Black Mage King's tutelage, the Fang clan has been like the sun in the sky. With the Black Mage King's influence, they've been expanding their power incessantly over the past 2 years. Right now, they're ranked 3rd among the 5 great clans. Jessica continued, "But you asked me about Li Shuanghua. She's a divine-level expert, a top-notch existence in Demonic City. How could I possibly know where she is? I only know that she hasn't appeared in public for a few months." "A few months?" Fang Xingjian thought to himself. Li Shuanghua had probably started making preparations to forge a divine remains equipment a few months ago, and he had no idea where she had hidden herself. What he was most worried about was that Li Shuanghua had gone to Miracle World. With how big the world was, it would be really hard for him to find her. If it really did not work out, he could only lure the snake out of its hole. That way, he would have to go up against Li Shuanghua and her allies head-on. This was Fang Xingjian's last resort. Just then, the doorbell rang. Jessica looked at Fang Xingjian anxiously. Fang Xingjian said, "What are you looking at me for? If someone's ringing the doorbell, go and pick it up." Jessica got up, trembling. She felt that her limbs were sore and weak, and it was all because of the pain from earlier. Switching on the video call, a man in a suit appeared on the screen. It was Gustav, who had just left in his sports car. He said, "Jessica, you left your wallet on me earlier. Let me bring it up for you." Jessica was just about to say something when she heard a voice ringing out in her mind. It was Fang Xingjian's voice. "Who is he? Our matter has nothing to do with him." The pain that was almost 1,000th of a second caused Jessica to let out a stifled grunt. In the video call, Gustav asked puzzledly, "What's wrong with you, Jessica?" Jessica shook her head, forced a smile, and said, "It's nothing. I just slipped a little." Simultaneously, she sighed inwardly. It's someone from the DuPont clan. "Oh, White Eagle Country's DuPont clan. That's them." Fang Xingjian smiled. "You're quite good at finding a rich husband. Right now, The clans with the strongest influences on Earth were naturally the 5 great clans, who had divine-level experts. They had joined forces with the governments of various countries to form the Earth's Federation, and it could be said to be the strongest influence on Earth. Below the 5 great clans, there were also many old influences on Earth, or new clans that had risen up after the appearance of Demonic City. The White Eagle Country's DuPont clan was an old clan on Earth. They were extremely wealthy and had a wide network of connections. Regardless of whether it was in the military or political world, they had a great influence. Even the 5 great clans, who had divine-level experts, could only suppress them and not kill them casually. Otherwise, if they caused an intense backlash, it would probably lead to a world war or even nuclear crisis. Looking at Gustav in the video call, Fong Xingjian nodded slightly, already having an idea. Someone from the DuPont clan can be used. The exchange in their minds only lasted for a short moment. On the other end of the video call, Gustav smiled and asked, "How is it? Am I not welcome?" Fong Xingjian's voice also rang out in Jessica's mind. "Let him in." Jessica sighed inwardly and pressed the button. 2 minutes later, Gustav appeared at the door. Jessica opened the door and threw him a helpless glance. However, not long after Gustav walked in, his smile disappeared. His gaze passed by Jessica and landed on Fong Xingjian, who was sitting casually on the sofa. Gustav frowned, and a cold gleam flashed in his eyes. Chapter 481. Jessica, who is this guy? Gustav was a direct descendant of the DuPont clan. Although he was not one of the top 5 successors, he was still a core member who had received elite nurturing from a young age. Recently, he had really taken a liking to Jessica. Therefore, when he saw that a man had appeared in Jessica's apartment, he was extremely unhappy. Fong Xingjian smiled and crooked his finger. A breeze blew past, and the door behind Gustav was closed. Gustav did not think much of this. As a member of the DuPont clan's upper echelon, he naturally had an abundance of resources. Not only had he been living in Demonic City for a long time, but he had also reached level 29 a long time ago. However, young people like him, who came from a great clan and the ancient aristocrats of the White Eagle Country, would never bother to take action personally. He merely looked down at Fong Xingjian, shook his head, and said, "Forget it. I don't care who you are either. Scram from this room within a minute, and I'll pretend that I didn't see anything." Hearing this, the first person to turn pale with fright was Jessica. After the simple exchange earlier, she had a deep understanding of how terrifying Fong Xingjian was. Moreover, if anything were to happen to Gustav here, the DuPont clan would definitely not let her off easily. She said, "Xingjian, on account of our many years of friendship, please spare him this time." This was a sentence that would cause a man's pride to be unable to bear, let alone a person as favored by the heavens like Gustav. He glared at Jessica furiously and said, "Jessica, do you know what you're saying?" "Gustav, don't say anything first. You be **starred, scram immediately. You shut up. You're doing this for a gigolo. I beg of you, stop talking. Xingjian, he's from the DuPont clan. Consider carefully." "Haha, all right. Are you going to help this gigolo?" "Gustav, I'm helping you. Shut up." Just as the two of them were gradually getting into an argument, Fong Xingjian said calmly, "The DuPont clan is quite powerful, but no matter what, I'm still a member of the Fong clan. It's impossible for me to leave just like that. Moreover, based on what you said earlier, I'll at least take one of your arms today." "Take one of my arms?" Gustav frowned and said coldly, "Someone from the Fong clan? I visited the Fong family a few months ago, but I didn't see you." As expected, the other party knew someone from the Fong family. Fong Xingjian rubbed his fingers and said calmly, "Oh, is that so? I wasn't at the Fong clan a few months ago, so I didn't see you." Fong clan, right?" Gustav took out his cell phone and said, "I'll call Fongkin now, the vice president of the Tianju Corporation. Ask her to come over. She's also an important figure in the Fong family. I want to see if she knows you." Fong Xingjian smiled. The other party was more cooperative than he had expected. Fong was a member of the Fong clan's branch family. She was also the vice president of the Tianju Corporation, one of the Fong clan's assets. Gustav had followed his grandfather to visit the Fong clan a few months ago. He had even met Granny Fong, but he had not seen Fong Xingjian. He knew that Fong Xingjian was probably just a pawn of the Fong clan. Therefore, he had to make use of his connections and get Fong to teach him a lesson personally. This was how descendants of ancient clans like him did things. They would not take action personally, but would use their power to suppress others. This was especially so since Fong had been very respectful toward him recently, as she had been asking for his help in business. This was the perfect time to make use of him. Fong can? I'm Gustav. I met a guy here who claims to be from the Fong clan. He says he wants to take one of my arms. Do you want to come over and take a look? After hanging up the call, Gustav threw a sideways glance at Fong Xingjian, as if he wanted to see Fong Xingjian panicking. He knew how strict the Fong clan's rules were. The elders had complete control over the lives and deaths of the juniors. They controlled all marriage and future arrangements. Elsewhere, the DuPont clan was an ancient clan. After paying a visit to the Fong clan a few months ago, they had entered into an all-out cooperation with the Fong clan and invested a huge amount of money into the Fong clan. They could be said to be the Fong clan's god of wealth. Fong had received orders to take good care of Gustav, and she had also recently had a request for Gustav. Therefore, the moment she heard the call, she rushed over. 20 minutes later, a lady with a medium build, gold-rimmed glasses, and a female suit walked in. She had the appearance of an elite, westernized female elite. Gustav, are you all right? I'd like to see which junior is spouting nonsense here. Your DuPont clan is a clan that is related to our Fong clan. I'll definitely not allow something like this to happen. Gustav smiled coldly as he looked at Fong Xingjian. Jessica, who was at the side, had an extremely anxious look in her eyes. She felt that things were getting out of hand, but she had already been completely suppressed by Fong Xingjian's sword intent, unable to say a single word. After Fong finished speaking, she first nodded at Gustav and then looked toward Fong Xingjian. Her eyes immediately revealed astonishment. Xingjian, to think that it's you. Fong Xingjian said calmly, long time no see, Aunt Can. I don't wish to alarm that old lady, Li Shuanghua, so I can only invite you over like this. Only the main clan's members could stay in the Fong clan's manor. However, Fong Xingjian had also seen the people from the branch clan during gatherings. Fong Can's expression turned solemn as she said, Xingjian, do you know how long we've been searching for you? Why do you only return now? Do you still have any respect for the clan's rules? A cold gleam flashed in Fong Xingjian's eyes. Looking for me? You want me to be Fong Xingqian's disciple, right? Do you think that this is the right thing to do? Fong frowned and said, Xingjian, the clan has brought you up, provided you with food and a place to stay. Of course, you have to repay the clan. This is something that is only right and proper. Which clan in the world doesn't do this for a long time? Moreover, although the status of an apostle is a little lower, you'll be able to share the powers of black magic with Xingqian. Although magic prints are easier to pick up compared to black magic, only by truly grasping black magic will one be able to become a top-notch expert. What's so bad about this? Fong Xingjian smiled coldly and said, then you're going to capture me and bring me back. Fong sighed and said, come back with me. After all, the clan head is your grandmother. He won't really harm you. With that, she took a step forward and appeared before Fong Xingjian as if she had teleported. She grabbed out with her palm, bringing about a series of strong gales as she pressed down toward Fong Xingjian's shoulder. However, at the next moment, streams of sword intense soared into the sky. Fong Can, Gustav, and Jessica all let out agonizing cries and were sent flying out. Then sword light flashed all over their bodies, and streams of blood splattered on their bodies. The three of them had already fallen to the ground, suffering from serious injuries. Jessica was prepared for this, but Gustav was completely dumbfounded by the scene before him. He had never thought that the pretty boy would be able to defeat the three of them with a single move. What kind of strength was this? What kind of means was this? Fong Can half knelt on the ground and looked at Fong Xingjian in disbelief. She said, Xingjian, this is a knight's martial technique. You've transitioned into a conferred knight in Miracle World? That's right. I've already become a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. This time around, I've come back to ask Li Shuanghua for my mother's remains. He then looked at Fong Can and said, Li Shuanghua, where are my mother's remains? Hearing that Fong Xingjian had become a demigod with 1 tier of perfection, Jessica did not feel anything. However, both Gustav and Fong Can gasped. They held great authority in their respective clans and had even been to Miracle World before. Therefore, they naturally knew what the path of a knight was. They also knew that it was over 100 times harder to level up compared to Magic Prince warriors, and they also knew how powerful a demigod with 1 tier of perfection was. This was especially so for Fong Can. She could not understand how Fong Xingjian had managed to achieve this within a mere 2 years. Chapter 482. Right now, Gustav's gaze was filled with terror and regret. He had not expected that the person he would be dealing with was a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. Moreover, this person was right before him. Streams of sword intent kept on going to and fro in his mind, causing him to constantly feel waves of piercing pain all over his body. He first turned to look at Fong Can and asked, Fong Can, is this person really from your Fong clan? Who is he from your Fong clan? Fong Can let out a bitter laugh and said, he's the clan's maternal grandson, Fong Xingjian. He's also Miss Yuru's son. Fong Xingjian? Gustav had heard that the Fong clan had an eldest grandson, Fong Xingjian. He was an ordinary person with ordinary talent and was not favored. 2 years ago, he had even run away from home and disappeared. To think that he had become a demigod and had even come back. Gustav looked at Fong Xingjian and said, Demigod, I really didn't know of your identity. I respect your power and hope that you can forgive me for being rash this time around. I'll definitely make it up to you after this. I've said it. Faced with Gustav's pleas, Fong Xingjian said calmly, You've been disrespectful to me. At the very least, I'll have to take away one of your arms. With your DuPont clan's abilities, it's not a big deal to take away another arm. Gustav still wanted to plead for mercy, but his pupils suddenly dilated as he stared at his right hand. Under everyone's astonished gazes, Gustav's right arm had disappeared unknowingly. Fresh blood spurted out from the wound on his shoulder, and Gustav rolled on the ground while crying out in agony. He no longer had the demeanor of a descendant of a great clan. As the successor of an ancient clan, he had always been well-fed and provided with resources to reach level 29. He had not even experienced life and death battles before. So how could he possibly endure the pain of losing an arm? In the blink of an eye, he fainted from the pain. After all, Magic Prince warriors mainly relied on the power of Magic Prince. They did not have as many realms and abilities as knights. Even at level 29, not all of them had the ability to regenerate. If Gustav were to continue fainting like this, he would probably die from blood loss. The despair in Jessica's eyes intensified. With what she had done to Fong Xingjian, she did not dare to imagine how Fong Xingjian would take revenge on her. At the next moment, Fong Xingjian looked at Jessica and said, The person I'm looking for is here. I'm going to kill you now. What else do you have to say? Jessica suddenly knelt on the ground and was stunned for a moment. Her tears fell like a kite with a broken string. Under the fear of death, her mind was blank and she could not think of anything. Fong Xingjian shook his head. Just as he was about to make his move, Jessica suddenly screamed, Wait. Fong Xingjian, you're looking for Carolyn, right? Difficulties? What difficulties could make her kill her own daughter, torture her own grandson, and raise me like a pig? After I was kidnapped by Caroline and those black devils from the Onassis clan, did she do anything? From the beginning to the end, she has never treated me as her grandson. Fong can continue to persuade him, Xingjian, what happened 18 years ago isn't that simple. The clan head must have her own difficulties. Seeing that Fong can still wanted to say more, Fong Xingjian's gaze flashed, and sword light seemed to shoot out, slashing off both of Fong Can's arms. Fong Can's expression was one of despair, pale and weak. She smiled bitterly and said, "Then what do you want? I'll say this first. If you want me to help you deal with the clan head, then I'd rather die right now. Otherwise, my entire family will die. Of course, I don't expect to bring you along to deal with that old demoness." Fong Xingjian said calmly, "The Fong Clan's clan gathering should be taking place soon. I want you to tell me where it is and then bring me there." A great clan like the Fong clan would have a gathering every month. During the gathering, they would maintain the clan's cohesiveness and summarize the clan's situation for the past month. Hearing that Fong Xingjian was foolish enough to want to go to the clan's gathering directly, Fong Can's spirits were roused and hope to live on reignited in her eyes. She said, "No problem. I can bring you to the clan's gathering. It'll be tomorrow night. At that time, I can even bring you there directly, and you'll be able to meet the clan head directly. At that time, you can confront the clan head about the cause of Yoru's death." How could Fong Xingjian not be able to tell what she was thinking? However, he did not expose her. Sword intent circulated in his eyes, and his killing intent gradually retracted. Chapter 483. 2 years ago, when something happened to Fong Xingjian, it was his grandmother, Li Shuanghua, who had forced him to run away from home. Then Jessica betrayed him, causing him to land in the hands of the female, Black Carolyn. The one who had tortured him the most for 7 days and 7 nights was the female, Black Carolyn. However, throughout the entire incident, the person Fong Xingjian hated the most was still his grandmother. Regardless of whether it was her killing his mother, refusing to give him resources for his cultivation, forcing him to become Fong Xingjian's apostle, or her indifference towards the kidnapped Fong Xingjian, all of these had caused him to be extremely disappointed with his grandmother. Moreover, this time around, she was going to use his mother's skeleton to cultivate a divine remains equipment. Therefore, his first target was Li Shuanghua, the female Black Carolyn who had tortured him, and the Onassis clan who had planned to kidnap him were still behind him. Therefore, 1 day later, Fong Xingjian followed Fong Can to the outside of a huge manor, and then continued to follow Fong Can deeper into the manor. This manor of the Fong clan was not big, but there was a pavilion every 5 steps and a sentry every 10 steps. All the guards were the secret first transition black crystal armored cavalry that the Fong clan had nurtured. Each of these powerful level 19 warriors could chase up to a sports car and destroy a wall with a single punch. They were also equipped with battle suits, high-frequency sabers, and electromagnetic rifles. They could wipe out any army on Earth. If such a team were to appear 30 years ago, a small team of 10 people would probably be able to take over a country. However, right now, they were only here to watch the gate for the Fong clan. In the meeting room on the 2nd floor in the center of the manor, over 10 big shots from the various departments, organizations, companies, politicians, and the military of the Fong clan were seated there. As one of the 5 great clans in Demonic City, with the support of divine-level experts, the Fong clan's influence had long since reached Demonic City, Xian Country, and Earth. The 2 people seated at the very top were Fong Xingjian's 2nd uncle, Fong Yuehe, and 3rd uncle, Fong Yueming. 2nd uncle Fong Yuehe said, "Yueming, what was the meaning of last month? The Venecy Company has already started to work with us. Why did you send people to deal with them? Last week, their president committed suicide by jumping off a building, his wife died of lung cancer, and his daughter went missing. Don't tell me that this has nothing to do with you." 3rd uncle Fong Yueming chuckled and put on a rascally expression as he said impatiently, "Second brother, it's just a lousy company. To think that they got cocky when we asked them to hand over their patents, asking for a ridiculous price. I'll get someone to teach them a lesson right now. We won't have to spend a single cent, and the patents and their shares will naturally be ours." Hearing Fong Yueming's words, many of the upper echelon of the clan secretly frowned. It was because Fong Yueming had been, and Fong Yueming Fong that ago had Fong Yueming had and had, and had, and had, and became the Fong, and had, and had, and had, and had, and had, and had even had. Fong and Fong, and had Fong. Furthermore, old Granny Fong, Li Shuanghua, doted on him. Everyone knew that the next clan head would probably be his son, Fong Xingchen, who would dare to go against him. Although second Uncle Fong Yue's talent was not bad and he was very capable, managing countless organizations in an orderly manner, he had been married for many years and had no children. This had become his Achilles heel. When second Uncle Fong Yue saw how arrogant Fong Xingjian was, he was infuriated. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only try to persuade Fong Xingjian. Third brother, do you think our Fong clan lacks that bit of money? By doing this, you're embarrassing our Fong clan. Who would dare to work with our Fong clan in the future? Second brother, you're so annoying. With that, Fong Yueming stood up. I've made an appointment with a few friends, so I'll be leaving first. You guys can carry on chatting. Hold it right there, Fong Yue said furiously. Mother hasn't arrived yet, and you're leaving first? Are those useless friends of yours more important than our Fong clan's gathering? How can you say that, second brother? Isn't the reason why I've made so many friends for the sake of our Fong clan's connections? Seeing that the two brothers were getting increasingly loud, the members of the upper echelon all wore helpless expressions. They were not willing to get involved in the internal strife of the main clan. Just then, the door to the meeting room was pushed open, and Fong Can walked in slowly. Fong Xingjian followed behind her. Second Uncle Fong Yue turned and saw Fong Can. He let out a cold snort and said, Fong Can, why are you so late? Don't you know what time the gathering is today? Haha. Fong Xingjian's voice rang out from behind Fong Can. Second uncle, it's been 2 years since we last met, but your voice still sounds full of vigor. With Fong Xingjian's appearance, the entire hall was filled with gasps. Most of the people looked at Fong Xingjian in disbelief, as if they were looking at a ghost. A small portion of the people did not know Fong Xingjian. After hearing the explanation from the people beside them, they also looked at the young man before them with astonishment and curiosity. Third Uncle Fong Yueming was the first to shout, You little B****starred, you still dare to come back? His expression was extremely cold. Back then, when Mother asked you to be Xingchen's apostle, you actually ran away. You're really selfish, cold-blooded, and heartless to the extreme. Do you know that because of the problem with your bloodline, the new apostle that Xingchen got later on is much, much weaker? Hearing third Uncle Fong Yueming's words, Fong Xingjian smiled extremely cruelly. He looked at third Uncle Fong Yueming as if he was looking at a dead man. He ignored third uncle and turned to look at second Uncle Fong Yue. Back then, it was because Fong Yue had secretly released him from the morning hall that he had the chance to escape from the Fong clan. Otherwise, he would have become Fong Xingchen's slave for life. After he was kidnapped by Black Devil Carolyn, she said that second uncle had released him in order to weaken Fong Xingchen's power so that he could fight for the position of clan head in the future. However, regardless of whether what Carolyn said was true or not, Fong Xingjian had saved him. Fong Xingjian said, Second uncle, the reason why I've returned this time around is mainly for 2 matters. The first is to retrieve my mother's remains. The second is to ask Li Shuanghua why she killed my mother back then. Fong Xingjian's words once again shocked everyone. Both second uncle and third uncle had not expected him to be so direct, to say something like this in front of so many people. Back then, Fong Xingjian's mother, Mu Qing, Fong Yueru, had announced to the public that she had died from a difficult childbirth. Fong Xingjian's words immediately caused whispers to break out in the meeting room. Many people were gloating, and their eyes lit up. When these people from the branch clan saw the main clan getting into such a melodramatic situation, they were naturally more than happy to watch the show. Second Uncle Fong Yue frowned, and there seemed to be a deep sense of loneliness in his eyes. Xingjian, I know that you're suffering, but this isn't how things should be done. He then let out a deep sigh. You shouldn't have come back. Little B****starred. Since when was it your turn to spout nonsense here? Third Uncle Fong Yueming let out a cold snort and said, Take him down. He then looked towards second Uncle Fong Yue and said, Second brother, as for the matter of you letting Xingjian go, will settle the score when Mother comes back. Over 10 black crystal-armored cavalry charged in from outside, all of them aiming their electromagnetic rifles at Feng Xingjian. Two of them then split up to capture Feng Xingjian. Through the strong killing intent from the black crystal-armored cavalry, Feng Xingjian could sense that if he were to make any strange movements, they would really open fire. With a loud bang, the combat suits that were strong enough to defend against grenades were instantly shattered, and the two black crystal-armored cavalrymen were sent flying with blood spurting from their bodies. Almost at the same time that Feng Xingjian moved, all the black crystal-armored cavalry opened fire at the same time. The electromagnetic cannons shot out armor-piercing bullets at 10 times the speed of sound. Each bullet could tear through armor and penetrate tanks. Countless bullets rained down on Feng Xingjian's body. When the bullets hit Feng Xingjian's body, they immediately felt as if they had hit some indestructible material. With swoosh, 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 countless electric sparks splattered and then bounced out like ricochets, scaring all the members of the upper echelon into retreating rapidly. What? How is this possible? With several hundred armor-piercing bullets firing at 10 times the speed of sound, even a fortress would be destroyed. To think that he managed to block them head-on. Just as everyone was feeling astonished, Feng Xingjian moved. In an instant, his entire figure disappeared, becoming incomparably ethereal. Like a wisp of green smoke, he charged into the midst of the black crystal-armored cavalry. Then, he punched out with both his fists, bringing with them the most primitive and wildest power, as well as containing boundless evil and cruelty. Like a super meat grinder, flesh and blood splattered in that instant, and all of the black crystal-armored cavalry were torn into pieces. How dare you? Almost at the moment when Feng Xingjian charged into the crowd and crushed all the black crystal-armored cavalry with the power of his fists, the middle-aged man who had been resting with his eyes closed made his move. With this move, he was like a divine dragon from beyond the heavens, appearing behind Feng Xingjian with a flash. His fists flickered for a while like spots of starlight, and countless punches were reflected on Feng Xingjian's body. Each punch he struck out brought along a martial will that shook one's heart. With each punch that landed on Feng Xingjian's body, the major characters in the surroundings would all feel their hearts thumping fiercely. After over 10 consecutive punches, each of the major characters felt giddy, suspecting that their hearts would explode. This was the martial technique that the middle-aged man was famous for, the soul-shocking fist. With each punch he struck out, the explosive force of his body was secondary. The most amazing thing was the unparalleled martial will contained in his fists, which could shake one's heart and destroy the other party's mental state. It was said that he had once fought against over 10 assassins who were dressed in armored suits. Each punch he struck out would shake one's heart. With just 20 punches, all of the armored warriors appeared to be unscathed, but all of them had died due to their hearts exploding. This time around, the middle-aged man used his full power against Feng Xingjian. With each punch he struck out, Feng Xingjian's body would stiffen up. It was as if the middle-aged man's martial will was so great that he was unable to move. After performing all 108 soul-shocking fist strikes, the middle-aged man's countenance turned pale, and beads of perspiration appeared on his forehead. It was clear that a lot of his mental will had been depleted. Looking at Feng Xingjian's stiff and unmoving body, the middle-aged man smiled coldly and said, "What's the use of having a strong physical body if you don't train your mind when you train your fists?" The corners of Feng Xingjian's lips curled up into an evil smile. "You're done." "What?" At the next moment, over 1,000 streams of mysterious aura soared up. Before the middle-aged man could react, a ferocious power had already exploded on his chest. He was torn into two halves by two gushes of power, one from the left and the other from the right. Strong gales gushed out in all directions with Feng Xingjian's actions, splattering endless amounts of blood everywhere. All the big shots in the surroundings were astonished and horrified. They had been in the upper echelons of society for a very long time, and their levels were basically pushed through resources. When had they ever witnessed a fight like this? To think that even the soul-shocking fist was torn apart by him. This Fang Xingjian's body is so strong. He's just like a human-shaped monster. Third Uncle Fang Yueming was so infuriated that his eyes were bloodshot. He pointed at Fang Xingjian and scolded, "B*** starred. You're a B** starred who doesn't deserve to be a son. To think that you dare to kill a member of the Fang clan. Today, I'm going to teach you a good lesson on behalf of my mother. I'm going to let you know the difference in status and what it means to have strict rules." However, Fang Xingjian glared at him, and Fang Yueming immediately retreated 3 steps in fright. Then a black shadow encompassed third Uncle Fang Yueming's body. It was Fang Xingjian dashing out. His fist seemed to carry the most terrifying power in the world, striking out with a force that could shatter the heavens and shatter the earth. With this punch, everyone present felt as if an extremely ferocious and evil huge beast had soared into the sky. After a furious bellow, the huge beast shattered the earth and shattered the sky. Everything before them turned dark, as if the entire world had shattered and the sun and moon lost their light. Faced with Fang Xingjian's punch, everyone present seemed to be unable to muster up any will to resist. Their spirits, wills, and consciousness were being pressured to the point that they were creaking, as if they would shatter completely at the very next moment. Chapter 485. Faced with such a ferocious punch, Fang Xingjian's third uncle, Fang Yueming, was scared out of his wits. He was unable to unleash the power of his level 29 magic prince. He just stared blankly at the violent fist slowly smashing towards him. However, just as the fist was about to smash onto Fang Yueming's head, another palm came thrusting out with an aura similar to that of Nuwa, mending the heavens. If one were to say that Fang Xingjian's fist was like a huge, violent beast, wanting to overturn the world and tear the sky apart with each movement, then this slanted palm would be like Nuwa mending the heavens. Even if Fang Xingjian were to shatter the sky, Fang Xingjian was going to mend the heavens with a single hand. At the instant the fist and palm collided, a stifled sound rang out in everyone's minds. It was as if their consciousness had been completely shattered, and their minds went blank. At the next moment, violent gales gushed out from the point where the 2 palms collided, forming shock waves that sent the entire conference room flying. The moment the fist and palm collided, the strong gales brought about by the collision blew away the entire conference room's building and walls. What terrifying physical strength was this? Fang Xingjian looked up. The only person who could react to his punch, and even fend it off, was indeed his second uncle, Fang Yuehe. Fang Yuehe bellowed furiously, "Xingjian, are you going to kill even your third uncle? I'll kill whoever tries to kill me. It has nothing to do with who they are or who they have backing them up." With that, Fang Xingjian darted out toward his third uncle, Fang Yueming, with a flash. Second Uncle Fang Yuehe let out a furious bellow and gave chase. His entire body lit up with a green glow. It was the glow of the power of Magic Prince. At this moment, second Uncle Fang Yuehe had started to utilize the evil god's powers. At the next instant, wherever Fang Xingjian's hands passed by, the atmosphere seemed as if it had received the orders of a sovereign king. It gathered spontaneously, turning into many huge dragons that went out to bind Fang Xingjian. There were 12 types of black magic, and it was the same for Magic Prince. The 12 different diabolic energies represented 12 different types of power. Unlike Tyron's gray-robed mages and Fang Qian's gray Magic Prince, which could summon creatures from other worlds and modify living creatures, the Green Magic Prince and the diabolic energy possessed by the green-robed mages were most adept at simulating and unifying. Practitioners could almost unify all the abilities in the world. Therefore, Green Robe and Green Mageweth were the most unique, yet the least unique of the 12 sects. This was because their masters could use any power. The Fang clan was led by Old Granny Fang. and she naturally specialized in controlling the atmosphere. Second Uncle Fong Yueha, who had gone through the second transition, was also old Granny Fong's second transition job, the Heavenly Calamity Envoy. He specialized in controlling the atmosphere and creating natural disasters. It was said that when old Madame Fong had roamed Miracle World in the past, she had seen a divine-level ferocious beast and had imitated its ability to control the atmosphere. A series of chi dragons were born around Fong Xingjian's body. They naturally wrapped around Fong Xingjian and entangled him. Simultaneously, everyone in the surroundings was surrounded by a chi dragon, protecting them. Each of the chi dragons had gathered countless gases, and the power they contained could sweep up mountains and engulf rivers. Seeing that Fong Xingjian was being torn apart by the several hundred chi dragons, second Uncle Fong Yueha shouted, "Xingjian, surrender quickly. Once my chi dragon formation is activated, even I won't be able to control its prowess. You're just a few transparent earthworms, yet you dare to call yourselves dragons?" However, Fong Xingjian let out a cold laugh and then took in a deep breath. Countless electromagnetic waves, radiation, heat energy, and light energy gushed out wildly toward his body. All the powers in his body surged, and over 1,440 streams of aura rose up from his body. Terrifying powers seethed to and fro in his body, as if there was an earthquake erupting from the ground. Crackling sounds rang out incessantly. His entire body trembled vigorously, and the hundreds of atmospheric dragons in the surroundings were all blasted away. Then he punched out with both fists, and several tens of atmospheric dragons were directly blasted into gale force winds. Second Uncle Fong Yueha's countenance changed drastically. He had not expected that the ether particle density in Demonic City would be so low, and diabolic energy would also be extremely weak. Most warriors would mainly rely on their physical strength to fight, and their extraordinary powers will be 10 times weaker than when they were in Miracle World. It was because he had accumulated a tremendous amount of diabolic energy in his body that he was able to perform the Chi Dragon formation. To think that his opponent had used his physical body to break through the formation. How strong was his opponent's physical strength? Just as his countenance changed drastically, he let out a loud bellow. Explode. In that instant, the chi dragons that had been surrounding Fong Xingjian exploded one after another. The condensed high-pressure air radiated out wildly, and the explosive prowess of each of the chi dragons was comparable to a fuel-air explosive grenade. And now, several hundred chi dragons were equivalent to several hundred fuel-air explosive grenades exploding. What kind of prowess was this? With a single attack, the entire Fong clan's manor was blasted into smithereens, and the few streets within a range of them were also flattened by the shockwaves. A mushroom cloud soared into the sky, and the ground trembled crazily as loud sounds rang out throughout the entire demonic city. All the members of the upper echelon who had been dragged out by the chi dragons felt a lingering fear when they saw this astonishing explosion. It was only then that they understood how second brother Fong had become so powerful without anyone knowing. The most terrifying thing was that no one knew what method he had used to accumulate a tremendous amount of diabolic energy in Demonic City. This was why he was able to unleash such powerful, extraordinary powers. However, just as everyone thought that even if Fong Xingjian did not die, he would be severely injured, a black shadow dashed out abruptly and appeared before Fong clan's second brother. It was Fong Xingjian. Right now, Fong Xingjian's clothes were in tatters, but there was not even a hint of blood on any part of his body, let alone being injured. He was completely unscathed. Fong clan's second brother let out an astonished cry, and over 10 more chi dragons instantly took form. They grabbed out toward Fong Xingjian and exploded once again. However, this time around, Fong Xingjian opened his mouth and let out a furious bellow. Terrifying sound waves gushed out toward the chi dragons, scattering them one by one. Then he grabbed out toward Fong clan's second brother, Fong Yueha. Wherever he passed by, many air shields would be shattered, and his battle robes would explode before they could even get close. Just as his palm was about to grab onto Fong Clan's second brother's head, a piece of pure green jade flew out from his body. In that instant, it burst forth with streams of green light, forming a protective shield that was about to protect Fong Clan's second brother. This was clearly what Fong Yueha had used to accumulate diabolic energy, and it was clearly a treasure as well. However, faced with this explosive power, Fong Xingjian did not even look at it. There seemed to be another huge beast's roar ringing out in the world, and the violent palm force shattered the protective shield. Then he grabbed Fong Yue's neck with his claw. As power gushed out, he instantly shook off all of Fong Yue's resistance and lifted him up like a little chick. Chapter 486. Seeing that Fong Yueha had been captured, the other members of the upper echelon let out an astonished cry and instinctively wanted to save him. One of them spewed out a tornado toward Fong Xingjian, but he was sent flying back with a single blow from Fong Xingjian. He crashed into the ground and fainted. Another person slashed out over 100 high-speed wind blades, but they were all kicked away by Fong Xingjian with a single kick. With just this kick, the shock waves formed from the compression of the air shattered all the wind blades, and he was sent flying several tens of kilometers away. Another person dashed up to Fong Xingjian and slashed out the high-frequency blade in his hand toward Fong Xingjian's neck. The high-frequency blade, which kept on vibrating at a high speed of 20,000 times per second, could slice through all metals in this world. This was especially so when the Fong clan's upper echelon, who was wielding the blade, had a ferocious aura. The power of the blade was condensed into one, and it was clear that he was an expert in using the blade. With this slash, he had an aura that seemed as if he would be able to slash through even if there was a mountain before him. With a clang, the Fong clan's big shot was overjoyed. It's a hit. No matter how strong your body is, to think that you're using your throat to take on my full-powered slash. You're too arrogant. However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, the Fong clan's big shot realized at the next moment that he could not slash down no matter how hard he tried. There was even a rebounding force, and the high-frequency blade was instantly shattered into dust. The Fong clan's big shot's tendons and bones were also broken, and he fell to the ground, spewing out blood. Faced with everyone's attacks, Fong Xingjian did not even move his upper body from the beginning to the end. He stood in midair like a demonic god from hell, with one hand gripping tightly onto the throat of the Fong clan's second son, Fong Yueha. Evil auras soared all over his body, and he was filled with a brutal, cunning, and evil aura. At this moment, none of the Fong clan's upper echelons dared to charge forward. They stared at Fong Xingjian, who was hovering in midair. They were like ducks that had their throats grabbed, unable to utter a single word. Fong Xingjian swept through the entire place, grabbing onto the Fong clan's second son, Fong Yueha, as if he was catching a little chick. His long black hair fluttered in the wind like flames as he said calmly, "Under Li Shuanghua's leadership, the Fong clan is getting worse with each generation. The upper echelon is mediocre and useless, while the lower echelons are unable to make a name for themselves. The third son, Fong Yueming, is an extremely useless piece of trash. In my opinion, from today onwards, Li Shuanghua's position as patriarch shall be completely abolished. Let me lead the Fong clan." Hearing Fong Xingjian's words, everyone in the Fong clan turned pale with fright. The Fong clan's third son, Fong Yueming, bellowed furiously, "Insolence! You little be***starred. How dare you boast so shamelessly?" Boasting shamelessly? There are so many useless good-for-nothings among you, and yet you can't even take a single attack from me. What problem is there for me to lead all of you? The Fong clan's third son, Fong Yueming, said furiously, "Inhumane. As expected, you're inhumane. To think that you would even say such disgraceful words. Mother was right about you. You're an ingrate who can't be tamed. Have you said enough? If you said enough, then you can go and die." Fong Xingjian's eyes narrowed, and his body brought up a long stream of air currents. His other empty hand had already clenched tightly into a fist, and it was as if a meteor had descended from the sky, smashing fiercely toward Fong Yueming's head. However, just then, a strange change took place. The corners of Fong Yueming's lips curled up into a strange smile. At the next moment, when the fist smashed onto his head, Fong Yueming disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Fong Xingjian was stunned for a moment. Then at the next moment, amidst a series of loud sounds within a range of 1 kilometer, many thick stone pillars rose up, forming a huge formation. Outside the formation, the Fong clan's third son, Fong Yueming, smiled proudly and said, "Fong Xingjian, do you really think that we don't know about your arrival? Fong Can has long since reported it to us in secret. Not only do we know that you've come, but we also know that you've already stepped into the path of a knight, becoming a demigod with 1 tier of perfection. However, we didn't expect that not only have your body's toughness reach perfection, but you also have the auras of over 1,440 specialty seeds. You've already reached 2 tiers of perfection, right? However, it's useless. This anti-ether formation is something that the Earth Federation has specially researched to deal with knights like you. Once it's activated, no matter what kind of martial techniques you have, you'll be unable to perform them. You'll even receive attacks from the entire geomagnetic forces. Fong Xingjian, you can just surrender now." The wife of the Fong clan's third son, Fong Yueming, said impatiently, "Why are you wasting your breath on him? To deal with a B***star like him, we'll have to give him a good beating first." Hearing what the two of them said, the countenances of everyone present changed drastically. This was especially so for Fong Can, whose countenance turned ghastly pale as she shouted, "Third young master, I'm still inside." Fong Yueming laughed out loud and said, "Fong Can, you've sacrificed yourself for the sake of the clan. I'll take good care of your entire clan for you." One of the Fong clan's elders said, "Excellent, excellent, excellent. What a ruthless third young master." Today, you don't just want to capture Fong Xingjian. You probably also want to get rid of all of us old fellows so that it'll be easier for you and your son to unify the clan in the future. Fong Yueming did not reply directly. He merely smiled and said, "My son has already become a person favored by the heavens and will be someone who will be able to move unhindered in the world in the future. As his father, I naturally can't embarrass him too much. As for the messy and trivial matters, I'll naturally take care of them for him." The cold gleam in Fong Yueha's eyes grew increasingly stronger. Being grabbed by Fong Xingjian, he was unable to speak casually, nor was he able to look in Fong Yueming's direction. He could only control the tremors in the atmosphere and say, "Third brother, you already know?" Fong Yueming nodded and said, "I'm sorry, second brother, but the Fong clan can only have 1 clan head, and my son is clearly more suitable. Therefore, I can only take the lead." This time around, Fong Yueming was planning to kill his second brother and those members of the Fong clan's upper echelon, then push all the blame onto Fong Xingjian. It was not just because these old people would hinder Fong Xingqian's rule over the Fong clan. There was also another reason. He had already found out that his second brother was keeping a small celebrity as a mistress, and that celebrity had gotten pregnant 3 months ago. Second brother had not had a descendant all this while, so Fong Yueha did not really see him as a worthy opponent. However, now that Fong Xingqian had an illegitimate child, Fong Yueha decided to make the first move to gain the upper hand. After all, people would change. In Fong Yueha's opinion, who knew if his second brother would still be as harmless after a few years after having a descendant? What's the point of saying so much? Third uncle's wife waved her hand and said, "Do it. Activate the Great Formation." Fong Yueming formed seals with both hands, and streams of electricity flashed. Countless changes happened to the geomagnetic forces, and streams of electricity moved to and fro within the formation. Wherever they passed by, all the buildings and streets would be turned into ashes. Simultaneously, the entire demonic city, as well as the 10 or so cities around Demonic City, experienced a large-scale blackout. All the electricity was gathered here. Then the anti-ether formation was completely activated, and streams of lightning filled up the entire space. Amidst a series of agonizing cries, over half of the Fong clan's upper echelon were turned into dust on the spot. As the atmosphere howled, Fong Xingjian's body dashed out, wanting to dash out of the Great Formation. However, just as he arrived at the edge of the Great Formation, he seemed to have crashed into an invisible barrier. With a loud boom, violent power gushed forth, and Fong Xingjian felt as if he had crashed into the continental shelf. His countenance changed, and gray light started to rise from his body. Chapter 487. As a series of gray lights soared up, Fong Xingjian's arm abruptly became thicker, and the muscle structure of his entire arm underwent a complete change. It was as if his arm had turned into a pair of dragon claws, exuding waves that could shake the heavens and earth. At the next moment, he let out an enraged bellow and punched out consecutively. With each punch, the sky would tremble, the atmosphere would howl, and streams of shock waves would blow away the surrounding streets. However, when his fist struck the invisible barrier, there was no reaction at all. Fong Yueming smiled coldly and said, "It's useless, Fong Xingjian. This is an anti-ether formation formed from geomagnetic forces. Right now, you're unable to perform any techniques and can only rely on your physical strength to explode. No matter how strong your physical body is, can it be that it can go up against the entire Earth's magnetic forces?" Fong Xingjian's gaze narrowed slightly, and his body landed on the ground. At the next moment, streams of lightning dragons struck the surface of his body, but they were absorbed by his body, turning into nutrients that strengthened his body. Second, Uncle Fong Yuehe hid behind him, protected by all the thunderbolts that he had attracted. There's really not a single technique that I can use. If it's black magic, the diabolic energy here is too weak. The amount of black magic that can be performed is very limited. A myriad of thunderbolts encompassed Fong Xingjian's body completely. Under the illumination of the dazzling thunderbolts, Fong Xingjian seemed to have turned into a sun on the ground. The ground within a range of 100 meters had been completely vaporized. Although Fong Xingjian was still absorbing the thunderbolts, his body was being heated up crazily. The power of thunderbolts here was sufficient to last the entire demonic city for 100 years. Even if one's body had attained perfection in its toughness, it would be impossible for them to continue fending off such a terrifying surge of energy. As the temperature continued to rise, even the physical particles would gradually break down, and the physical body would be completely turned into dust. Sensing this, a hint of nervousness appeared in Fong Xingjian's eyes. What a powerful formation! To think that even with my physical body with 2 tiers of perfection, I'm still unable to charge out. The people from your country are really powerful. I'll only be able to hold on for another half an hour at most before I'm refined to death by this thunderbolt. Another voice rang out in Fong Xingjian's mind. It's really beyond my expectations. They've used the entire city's electricity, and the Fong clan seems to have even built their own nuclear reactor. Reactor? What's that? It's nothing. Leave the rest to me. Just as the 2 voices in Fong Xingjian's mind finished speaking, Fong Yueming, who was outside the anti-ether formation, saw that Fong Xingjian had been completely suppressed and said, "Xingjian, are you still going to put up a stubborn resistance? If you surrender now and cripple your own cultivation, I might spare your life." He thought to himself that if he could get Fong Xingjian to replace the current apostle and help his son Fong Xingqian, he could indeed spare Fong Xingjian's life. However, just as he said that, there seemed to be another invisible sword slashing out from the void. Green light burst out from his body, but it also blocked this wave of attacks. What? Fong Yueming watched in astonishment as the green light barrier, which had expanded tremendously, slowly dissipated. It was as if there was something in void space incessantly slashing the light barrier around his body. He could not understand what was going on. This was especially so for the light barrier, which was formed completely from diabolic energy, which usually protected his body. However, before this invisible attack, it was as brittle as glass. Fong Yueming naturally did not know that the person being trapped by his anti-ether formation was not Fong Xingjian at all. Instead, it was the genius gray-robed mage who had disguised himself as Fong Xingjian, Tyrant. As for Fong Xingjian, he had been hiding in the spatial gaps from the beginning to the end, relying on the hint of sword intent he had left in Tyrant's body to communicate with him. Right now, Fong Xingjian was hidden in the spatial gaps, and there were only streams of invisible sharp swords slashing down incessantly around his body. It was the second sword of the 4 god-slaying swords, infiltrating void. Coupled with his physique, which was immune to diabolic energy, Fong Yueming's light barrier was unable to resist at all. The first sword of the 4 god-slaying swords, Rebirth, was a sword technique which forged one's foundation and strengthened one's attributes and potential. The second sword, Infiltrating Void, was a powerful sword technique which entered spatial gaps and passed through everything without a trace. It was unknown where it had come from and where it would go. What was even better than the Astral Obscurity sword was that Infiltrating Void could even hide the sword move at the moment of the attack, causing the other party to not know what had attacked them until they died. The third sword, Light Pursuit, was a sword technique which could slash out sword ripples which were several tens of times faster than the user's speed. It was an unrivaled sword technique which had extreme speed. The final fourth sword, All-Conquering, was a combination of all of Fong Xingjian's killing techniques. It was an extremely powerful sword technique which could slash through everything and even slash through light. This time around, Fong Xingjian, who had performed Infiltrating Void, was like a demon from beyond the heavens. Fong Yueming was unable to sense or understand it all. He could only watch as the light barrier protecting him was continuously slashed until it dissipated. Looking at the light barrier before him, Fong Xingjian understood that this was probably the power which Li Shuanghua had left in Fong Yueming's body to protect him. It was also the power which he had sensed hidden in Fong Yueming's body. "Who is it? Who's attacking me?" Fong Yueming bellowed. Fong Xingjian's voice rang out from all directions. "Fong Yueming, have a good taste of my sword technique. It's the world's #1, perfect and flawless sword technique." At the next moment, Infiltrating Void was activated at full power. Invisible and formless sword force burst out from Fong Yueming's body. When Infiltrating Void was performed to an extreme, it could penetrate through all matter and explode from within to kill the opponent. Amidst a world-shaking and agonizing cry, the sword force exploded in Fong Yueming's body, and he plunged down, covered in blood. His wife let out an astonished cry and caught hold of Fong Yueming. However, she felt a surging sword force erupting from her body as well. Third uncle and his wife immediately rolled on the ground, crying out in agony. Their powerful physical strength had turned the surrounding streets into ruins, but it was unable to alleviate the pain in their bodies. However, with Fong Xingjian intentionally holding back, they were only injured and not killed. They were in great agony. "You be asterisk starred. You'll die a horrible death. I'll definitely tear you into pieces." Third uncle's wife shouted loudly. "Mother, come and save us quickly. Save us, mother. Save us quickly." Due to Fong Yueming's severe injuries, the entire anti-ether formation was paused. Tyrant regained his usual feminine and pale appearance, grinning as he looked at Fong Yueming and his wife, who were struggling and crying out in agony. Second uncle Fong Yuehe, Fong Can, and the other remaining members of the clan's upper echelon all wore expressions of lingering fear. If it was not because Tyrant had absorbed all the firepower, they would have died long ago. Despite this, only the 5 of them were left. Looking at Fong Yueming and his wife, who had fallen to the ground and were crying out in agony, their expressions were extremely complicated. In the spatial gaps, Fong Xingjian, who had activated Infiltrating Void at full power, was now on his guard to the extreme. It was because he could sense that in Fong Yueming's body, There was an extremely tremendous and gloomy power that was filled with prestige and rules that was slowly awakening. Is it finally coming? At the next moment, an emerald glow burst out from Fong Yueming's eyes, and an old woman's voice rang out from Fong Yueming's throat. Vile spawn, are you thinking of killing your uncle? Fong Xingjian's voice, which was filled with killing intent, reverberated through the entire sky. Li Shuanghua, for the sake of some shares and patents, this Be-Astra-starred is willing to destroy other people's families. For the past few years, he has been acting like a tyrant in Demonic City, bringing harm to countless innocent people. Today, I'm going to kill him with a single slash of my sword. If you can stop me, then do so. Chapter 488. Hearing Fong Xingjian's words, the expression on Fong Yueming's face became even more savage. No, it should not be said to be Fong Yueming. It was because the physical body of this Fong clan's third son was now completely controlled by Li Shuanghua. The power and consciousness that Li Shuanghua had left in Fong Yueming's body had finally awakened completely at this critical juncture. A divine-level expert would be able to affect the physical world with just a hint of their martial will. A single thought from them would be able to create a typhoon, and a hint of their consciousness would be able to bring about tsunamis. Layers and layers of green magic prints continued to rise on Fong Yueming's body, accompanied by the descent of an extremely imposing and majestic will. Everyone felt as if their physical bodies were no longer under their control. Confer Knights could sense the area within a range of 10 meters, and the will of a divine-level expert was over 10 or even 100 times stronger than that of a Conferred Knight. In this instant, Li Shuanghua's will encompass the space within a range of over 1,000 meters, and hints of distortions kept on appearing in the air. It was her consciousness twisting the air unconsciously. At the sight of this scene, the countenances of everyone present changed drastically. The prowess of a divine-level expert was far too terrifying. With just a single action and thought, they would be able to affect the space within a range of 1,000 meters. Fong Xingjian, who was hiding in the spatial gaps, was also secretly astonished. However, with how strong his martial will was, how could he possibly be frightened? He immediately activated Infiltrating Void at full power once again, and streams of sword force gushed into Fong Yueming's body, exploding continuously from his blood vessels, nerves, brain, and even heart. However, this time around, Fong Xingjian's actions only caused Fong Yueming's body to tremble slightly, but he was completely unharmed. His entire body was encompassed by layers of green energy. This power seemed similar to the green diabolic energy, but it was not the diabolic energy. Instead, it was Li Shuanghua's power. She had refined the diabolic energy and turned it into her own power. Right now, it encompassed all parts of Fong Yueming's body, even encompassing each and every physical particle. She was able to forcibly fend off Fong Xingjian's sword force. At the next moment, the green light in Li Shuanghua's, Fong Yueming's, eyes burst out, and layers of stacking martial will seem to traverse through the world, searching out the many spatial gaps. The martial will of a divine-level expert was not only so powerful that it could affect the physical world, but it was also so detailed that it could even scan spatial gaps. Being able to extend and bend at will, covering a distance of 1,000 meters when it was at its strongest, and entering deep into spatial gaps when it was at its weakest. This was the martial will of a divine-level expert. Found you. At the next moment, green light flashed explosively in void space, and Fong Xingjian's silhouette suddenly appeared. He plunged down rapidly toward the ground from midair, smashing into the ground with a loud boom, causing the ground to seethe like waves and topple a large area of buildings. Feeling this terrifying might, third uncle's wife laughed out loud. "Little bastard, aren't you arrogant? Aren't you going to commit treason? Today, I'll let you know how big the gap is between you and a deity rank expert." But in the next moment, When she saw Li Shuanghua's green eyes turn towards her, Third Aunt was so frightened that she immediately stopped talking. "You are the daughter-in-law of the Fong clan. How can you make such a ruckus?" Third Aunt immediately nodded like a little chick. Li Shuanghua looked at the spot where Fong Xingjian had landed and said coldly, "Val Spawn, are you still going to resist?" At the next moment, invisible sword forces exploded within a 10-meter radius around Li Shuanghua, striking her until the streams of green light around her trembled crazily. There seemed to be countless green sparks splattering out. "It's useless," Li Shuanghua said coldly. "A divine level expert's martial will be even sturdier than a level 29 superior divine weapon. It can scan a range of 1,000 meters, and its transmission speed is at light speed. Its scanning granularity can reach physical particles and spatial gaps. What are you going to use to fight against me?" With a boom, Fong Xingjian, who was in the spatial gaps, was once again blasted out. After he landed on the ground, streams of green light continued to strike his body incessantly in void space. Li Shuanghua had used her martial will to attack him. The martial will of a divine-level expert allowed them to casually affect the physical world within a range of 1,000 meters. Moreover, martial will was a type of electromagnetic wave that could be transmitted at light speed, making it impossible for the person being attacked to block or dodge. They could only take on the attacks head-on. Amidst the crazy attacks, Li Shuanghua merely stood where she was. With a single thought, green light flashed explosively in void space, and waves of invisible martial will struck Fong Xingjian's body, smashing him 50 meters underground. "Vile Spawn, surrender!" As a thunderous bellow rang out and the green light burst out, Li Shuanghua's martial will turned into a huge green palm. There were all sorts of flashing green demonic prints on the palm, exuding a distant, mysterious, and cold aura. With the appearance of this palm, the atmosphere above the entire demonic city seemed to have been directly controlled and manipulated. Countless hurricanes gathered, compressed, forming many pure white spheres. It was Li Shuanghua's famous ultimate technique, Mountain Mist Tempest. Once each mountain mist tempest sphere compressed by the atmosphere exploded, the expanding shock waves would be able to destroy the buildings within a range of 100 meters. Right now, such mountain mist tempest had appeared in the sky, densely packed together and numbering in the tens of thousands. The sight of it caused one's scalp to turn numb. Everyone imagined that if these mountain mist tempests were to explode, half of Demonic City would be blasted away. Second Uncle Fong Yue's eyes were filled with desolation. On one hand, it was because Li Shuanghua's prowess as a divine-level expert was too great. The moment she made her move, Fong Xingjian, who had suppressed the entire scene earlier, was completely unable to retaliate. On the other hand, he secretly hated Li Shuanghua for being biased. To think that she had left her will and power in third brother Fong Yueming's body. He had been captured by Fong Xingjian earlier, but Li Shuanghua had not come out to protect him. "I'll probably never be able to take over the Fong clan as long as Mother is alive." As for Fong Xingjian, after witnessing the prowess of a divine-level expert once again, no one thought that he still had any hope. He was just another stepping stone to show off the divine-level expert's prowess. Looking at the densely packed tempest in the sky, a cold gleam flashed in Fong Xingjian's eyes. "Li Shuanghua, I've said that I'm going to kill Fong Yueming today, so I'll definitely kill him. No matter how hard you try to protect him, you won't be able to." Li Shuanghua bellowed coldly, "Be **starred, going against your superiors and attacking your elders. How can you still have the face to continue living in this world?" Fong Xingjian laughed and said, "Li Shuanghua, aren't you going to open your eyes and see what kind of useless son you've given birth to? He's tyrannical, bullies everyone, and his aptitude is extremely bad. Yet, he only knows how to be jealous of those who are more capable and to get rid of those who disagree with him. Right now, I'll be able to take on a group of them single-handedly. Seniors like him will only be a scourge if they are left alive. So what if I kill them all? Treason!" As Li Shuanghua let out an explosive bellow, the tempest came gushing down, charging toward Fong Xinjiang's body. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.